Okay, thanks everybody for being here this evening. We're going to get started with the agenda. The first item is a public meeting, and this is regarding the tax write-offs pursuant to Section 357 and 358 of the Municipal Act. So if anyone is affected by this and would like to speak, you can do so at one of the microphones. Okay, seeing no speakers on that item, we will call the regular meeting to order. I'm Mary Rita Holland. I am the chair of the committee. I'd like to welcome members of the committee tonight, Councillor Bohm, Councillor Schell, Councillor Camden, Councillor Stroud, and Councillor Senek. And our clerk here is Derek O'Shea. We will get started. First, we need a motion to approve the agenda, please. So moved by Councillor Camden, seconded by Councillor Senek. Thank you. Any questions, comments? Councillor Stroud?
So an addendum to the agenda with some actionable items there, 2 delegations and an item of business.
Exactly.
Do we need those moved separately? I'm not sure.
No. Right now, the motion would be to approve the agenda, including the addendum at this stage.
Yes, thanks, Councillor Stroud. So yes, we do have an addendum that has a number of correspondence items as well as a report. So it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Excellent, thank you. All right, so next we need to confirm the minutes from our last meeting. Can I have a mover, please? Councillor Senek, thank you. And a seconder? Councillor Stroud, thanks. Any discussion or comment on the minutes? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor? Carries. Any disclosures of potential pecuniary interest? Councillor Camden?
Thank you, and through you, I, Camden, the Corporation of the City of Kingston, declare my pecuniary interest in the matter of item C, residential rental licensing, as I am a landlord downtown Kingston.
Thank you. Great. Seeing no others, we will start then with our delegations. We have on the agenda 2 delegations. We have 2 more on the addeds. So we'll start in the order of the agenda. So I'd ask Philip Brown, please, to come forward. All of our delegations have 5 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Good evening. Before we start, I want to give a thank you to Derek, who solved a technical issue for us earlier tonight, so we get to see a video rather than talk about it. Just want to get this adjusted here. Yeah. Okay.
I know why this is. Pardon me, Philip. Okay, hopefully this isn't too loud.
I want to welcome you all of you here to the shores of Lake Ontario for this very special moment in the history of our city. This really is an amazing moment. The vision behind this project from the beginning was to take what was always a wonderful waterfront park and transform it into something spectacular. To transform it into a space that would set the standard for what a 21st century urban waterfront park could be.
Thank you. Can I just click from here? Don't you wish summer was back?
All right, so get your presentation back up.
Oh, so they did indeed go for an AP at the pier, after party at the pier, which is a term they use in the bars now. And then we got to clean up the mess every morning all summer long. I'll just go through these slides. You can see the comments from people who signed our petition about their concerns. This was a typical morning, pictures provided by a person who walks out there regularly. That is a stock photo, full transparency, but the quotes are real. This is an interesting slide from 1:30 in the morning. You can see a couple of people dancing up on top of the steel framework while the others are cheering them on down below. So like the mayor, I'm very proud of what the city has accomplished with Breakwater Park, although I'm not sure we're at the point yet where we could declare it the standard for urban waterfront parks for the 21st century. The community dialogue that's been created is around safety for our youth, for our community, and for the assets that we've invested in, as well to make staff and this committee aware of the safety issues and the risks associated with the late night partying that's happening on the pier. Well, the mayor has referred recently in the Wake Standard to personal accountability, responsibility, and common sense as a prerequisite for safe behavior. We always have to ask ourselves, how do young people come to understand that? Well, they come to understand it because we have the guidance and guidelines and boundaries that we, as adults, surround them with and educate them about. That's our role now as adults in society. With the new pier and beach, we've created attractions within Breakwater Park. Similar to having a water slide or a diving board, it is truly an attraction within the park and really represents a very small percentage of the entire Breakwater Park itself. So we're not suggesting the closure of a park at night or to set a precedent. This is a very unique asset in our community, and the attractions within the park will never be replicated in our community again. Many believe that if this type of prevalent behavior that has created this type of mess and takes this type of risk was happening anywhere else in the city, it would be shut down immediately. Setting a standard for care as a precedent is something that we as leaders in our community should be proud of and not fearful of. Oh, Derek? Okay. We secure many attractions within our community at night. Confederation Basin is locked and secured and patrolled. The Confederation Fountain has a fence around it out front to deter waders and climbers from going on it. The Thompson Pool Complex is fenced in at night, so you can't go up and take a dip at midnight up there. There's no skating or partying allowed on Market Square rink after 10 p.m. In fact, you can't even drink a hot chocolate while you're skating on Market Square for safety reasons. Our splash pad assets are turned off at sunset, so while you can go into the park at night, you can't get into the splash pad. You can't use the splash pad assets with water. And the Richardson Beach Bathhouse is also closed at sunset and opened every morning at sunrise. I also took a look at the great list of piers in the world, and you find that they're either supervised or closed at night. Navy Pier in Chicago, for instance, actually insists that anyone under the age of 18 is with an adult. In Toronto's Ontario Place, Trillium Park, and William G. Davis Trail operate from 5 a.m. till midnight. I suspect if you pitched up and threw a party at any one of these places in the evening, you'd be shut down pretty quickly.
30 seconds.
Even if the pier were closed tonight, there's still a full kilometer of beautiful waterfront to swim on 24/7. But I want to express the concern of over 600 people that we've created this lure that we have to be cautious about, that a yell for help from the pier can't be heard from King Street. And the consensus is that if we let enough young people go out there enough times at night in the summer, eventually something bad will happen. So let's do the right thing by securing or closing Edgar Downey Pier at night and celebrate the opening of it the next day. It's not a costly proposition, but not doing it can be. I've been asked what would I do if it was my choice, and I have a slide for that if you'd care to ask later. And I will end with one quote. "We know firsthand this is a dangerous practice after a late night out. Thankfully, our family member was pulled out by two strong males who saw there was a problem."
Thank you.
And
Okay.
I will open for questions.
Thanks very much. So we will now have questions from committee members. You have the opportunity to ask 2 questions. Councillor Shell?
Thank you. It has to do with safety, but in terms of when I sent you an email, have there been reports from some of these other places of people dying or being injured? Because I think that's your point. And as councillors, we hear it all the time. You must do something or someone's going to get killed. So that would be my question. Did you find in your investigation?
After I got your email, I did a quick search, and the death statistics report that the majority of deaths from recreational behaviors happen in the vicinity of water in Toronto. And I'll just add that most drowning deaths in Canada involve.
Yeah, I understand the huge waterfront, so you're talking about a very small piece of our waterfront, and I do understand your concern. But I also know with 30,000 students coming every year, they really do seem to behave in a way that they don't hurt themselves. It's hard to believe, but I don't think anyone's died or had major incidents for all the craziness that goes on. So I'm sort of unclear about why this pier, as a brand-new item, would be the thing that tips the balance.
Sure, well, when you talk about the 200-plus kilometers in our area, most of it's inaccessible. And the majority of it that is accessible is wade-in type water, ankles, knees, hips, until you figure out if you want to stay in or not. There's very few places in the area of Kingston where you're out of sight, out of mind from police or EMS, where you can leap into the dark water at night and then throw a party till 2, 3 in the morning without anybody coming along to say it's bad, and then the city shows up the next morning to clean it up. So it's not just about death, it's about community safety and personal safety. It doesn't have to mean someone's going to die. I mean, a tragedy could be as simple as knocking yourself unconscious or stepping on a piece of broken glass and slicing your foot open. And from a community perspective, if tourists go down there at sunrise in the morning and see the kind of mess that's being left, it's bad for business. And I think as adults, we owe it to our youth, whether there's things going on in our community that we don't like, and it's been said, oh, well, this is happening everywhere in our community at night. Okay, well, that's great, but let's not add an additional place that we actually lure people out to and endorse the type of behavior. I mean, I don't think if this was going on night after night anywhere else in the city that we'd tolerate it. It just happens to be out of sight, out of mind, and now with the prevalence of it and the new social media about it, we've attracted a much bigger crowd. So let's not think about death, let's think about prevention and guiding our youth for better behavior.
Councillor Sanik?
Thank you. Mr. Brown, how do you like the easiest way that we could close off the bridge? And there's also the side, right, the west side of the pier where PUC trucks can go, and that's where people could access as well? Thank
you, Councillor. So I've been questioned. If I were doing it, I would run an online competition, design competition. I'd sponsor it as public art. We need 2 pieces, one right there and one right there. I can envision some student coming up with something that looks like the time sculpture that opens and closes, a water tap that changes direction or something. I mean, and I would sponsor a piece of public art that became a ornamental closure for one of those places. So I think the public and the corporations in Kingston would step up. I'm not talking about something very costly. And like anything, try it for a year, see how it goes. You can always change it. You don't have to make a massive investment. I mean, we've just made, I'm sure, north of $100,000 investment in the name of safety to put a new crosswalk and change the sidewalks. And I think as this goes, we're going to be making more investments to make it safe. People want better washrooms and change rooms. They want access to fresh water. They want more police. They want more supervision and bylaw enforcement, and certainly want zero tolerance for alcohol, for drugs, for amplified music. This needs to be a family-friendly place, and if we get on it now and do it right, we will be welcoming families there forever. If we let it go and don't put enough attention to it, it has the potential just to become a party place that goes from sunrise to any hour of the night. So I think a very simple couple of ornamental closures, and yes, there'll be the outlier that'll leap off and swim across. But if you think about a group coming down from a bar all dressed up and you get to this point here, what's the likelihood you're going to leave your clothes, your cell phone, and your money and swim out to the pier for a dip? They've got all this space here, beautiful docks there, all along a kilometer of shoreline, which goes all the way over there. It's just when you're out here with the waves splashing against here, you're out of sight, out of mind. EMS could never get out there in time if there's a problem. If someone yelled for help from there, they'd never hear it. So if you're swimming along here and a young person is having troubles with friends or needs help, they're close to lights, close to streets, close to people. So I think blocking off that one tiny little piece of the park will make a massive change in how the behavior occurs. Because when people are closer to observation and lighting, I believe they'll behave a little differently.
Thank you. And my second question, do you see this as just being needed like for basically July, August, and September?
It's a little chilly now, yeah. It's probably, depending on how summer rolls in, it's probably a 100-day issue from, I swim in the lake every summer, and really it's a rare summer that you're in before the end of June for a deep swim. So, June to end of September is probably the period of time where there's the most kinds. It's the hot summer. Rock and rollers have been singing about hot summer party nights forever, and it's when the heat's out and it's humid and people are having fun. They just want to get out and shake their booty on the dock.
Councillor Canton.
Thank you. Through you, show the two places you were thinking of putting the block, like where you'd block people off. Part of me feels as though if somebody is so intoxicated or something that they were going to drown, it would happen all over, basically where the pier is, where the sand is. Like the whole area is kind of dangerous if that was the case based on the video I saw. Why is it those areas? I mean, I can't help but feel that if somebody was on the south side of the sandy area, that it's only 30 feet away. Like, wouldn't we put it closer to the road to block that space off?
Sorry, Councillor, let me just get back to the...
And I apologize if I'm being presumptuous. I'm assuming if there was an incident that it would probably be alcohol related at 2 in the morning?
Well, the prevailing winds come from southwest here. So on a windy night, the waves are slamming up against the wall here. This is quite protected in here. Listen, there have been people who suggested that the closure should be over here. Personally, first year out, I think that's a bit of a big ask. If this were closed off in the evening and the party moved back here and a year from now it's still a massive problem, you can look at that. Mm-hmm. But if someone gets hurt or injured or needs help, at least this way, if they're not way out here on the corner or out here, and I'm sure you've been down there, but there's a lot of physical assets that are easy to trip on, climb over. We've got basically a bit of a massive diving board here that's encouraging people to leap off there. So when you go with late night, dark, limited lighting, alcohol, large groups, peer pressure, I think it exacerbates the opportunity for a problem to happen. Mm-hmm. And it's supported by almost 600 names on petitions who agree with this approach. So
you think this is a good starting point more than anything? It's a good starting point.
Sure.
Yeah.
This will evolve for many years where there's going to be a lot of things that we'll need to do to make this successful in the community. My focus is on community and personal safety at the moment as opposed to other ancillary things that we might need to do down the road.
Fair enough.
Thank you. Any other members? Okay. Seeing none, thank you very much for the presentation. All right. Our next delegation is Sean Leclerc and Gary Kemble from Kingston Rental Property Owners Association, and they are here to speak regarding the residential rental licensing.
Get you at the podium, please.
Thanks very much. And just a reminder, it's 5 minutes per delegation, 5 minutes total, please. Okay. Thank you.
That's okay. I'll use a couple minutes and you can say. Good evening, everyone. My name is Sean Leclerc. I'm here as president of the Kingston Rental Property Owners Association. I'm here to speak to the proposed rental housing licensing bylaw that's sort of underway in Kingston. I'm going to read off a short statement of some of our concerns and things that we'd like staff and committee and council to think about as they look over this very important new piece of work for Kingston. So we want to talk about some concerns and some potential outcomes. I'll try to be brief and have my colleagues speak a little. Before enacting a new rental property licensing bylaw, we would ask that the raw data on the performance of existing bylaws, standards, yards, noise, etc., that needs to be made available for analysis by all stakeholders, not just the summaries, but raw data itself. Without the data, it's not possible to know if a new bylaw is appropriate at this time or how effective existing bylaws are. The effect on affordable housing, this one's very dear to me and very important in our community, both in terms of increased costs and reduction in housing inventory. It should be noted that there are more than 1,000 people on waiting lists in Kingston for affordable housing in our region, and that our vacancy rate is the lowest in the province right now. I'm sure many of you know this already. Given the far-reaching impact of the proposed bylaw will have on the economic well-being of vulnerable people in our community, I think our association feels that this decision shouldn't be rushed through as one of the last efforts of the exiting council, that this should really be something looked at with fresh eyes in the new year at the soonest, not taken care of before Christmas. If such a proposal comes into play here, I want to speak to another topic about conflicts of interest. It's my impression that council members who are landlords probably won't be voting on this, and so I wonder if it logically follows that councillors who are tenants maybe should be abstaining from this simply because they both have different vested interests in this outcome. And if only tenant councillors can vote, who's there to represent landlord interests? We have a very challenging legislative issue at the provincial level, and this municipal piece adds a tremendous amount of complexity for us. If this does go through, imposing licensing requirements only on landlords with 1 to 3 units is simply unfair and discriminates economically against small business. All landlords should be treated equally, just as all tenants have to be treated equally under human rights. Exempting those with site plan control agreements is only like picking well-educated, employed tenants who might cause less problems. I think we should really have an inclusive package or possibly no package. And lastly, all Kingstonians share directly or indirectly in the prosperity created by visiting populations, students, military, tourists, etc. We should all share in the associated costs. Additional costs should be a broad tax base, not aimed at one specific group, namely landlords. The ratepayers of Kingston have a right to know the true costs of running this city, and that includes the cost of cleanup of all types of housing. Thank you very much. Gary? Okay. We have 2 minutes. Does anybody have any questions for us? Okay.
Great.
Yep.
Okay, well, thank you. If that's it, then we will go to questions. Councillor Stroud?
Thanks. Clear from your presentation that as a rental landlord, you're worried about your bottom line, the costs that this proposal would entail. That certainly would be motivation if I were in your shoes to appear here and speak. So just in your own words, how do you, as a percentage of the rental income that an example building might bring in on an annual basis, and knowing from the report what the 5-year cost is for licensing, are there other costs involved, or how do you see this impacting the bottom line of a typical rental unit?
There's 2 aspects to this, and it has to do with the type of landlord you're dealing with. So a first-generation landlord, somebody like a lot of Canadians, there's no more defined benefit pensions. A lot of Canadians, if they have spare money, they're going into real estate, the hopes of a better retirement. Those folks are very vulnerable, and they provide a very valuable service in the community in terms of housing for a lot of different groups of people. They cannot weather unknowns when it comes to dealing with costs of housing. So that they're basically just early on, they're first generation. Someone who's inherited or been 3rd generation, they've got more buffer. And a lot of landlords are first generation, they're not equipped. So all landlords should be treated the same in this and consider that factor. In terms of bottom line, can you just catch your...
Just then the licensing fee report states is quite small on a 5-year basis. What would be the major costs incurred?
In my mind, I'm a property landlord. It's in this industry, a realtor. The licensing fee isn't the part that scares me, it's the uncertainty. And what does the mandatory inspections entail? I mean, if a scratch of paint is out of whack, does the landlord have to spend $2,000 on new paint because it's just not perfect enough? It's just the uncertainty factor is too high. And so if council, if staff, if committee can speak to that in future reports, that would be very valuable.
And one of the costs that had been on the original list was the cost of preparing drawings of the existing unit to go with the application, and not everyone's capable of doing that themselves, especially when you're dealing with the sizes of exit windows and things like that. So to hire someone to do that would be, the quotes I got were 80 cents to $1 a square foot. So for example, a 2,000 square foot house suddenly becomes a $2,000 cost. That would be a one-time cost, but would have to be amortized over as long as one is going to be a landlord, I guess.
Thank you. At that last point, I'd heard large numbers thrown about in the conversations around the neighborhood, and I was wondering where that piece was coming from. You just clarified that. Thank you.
We haven't gone through, and now in the latest report, the things that will be included in that application are open to discussion over the next year with the subcommittee that's being formed, working group rather, that's being formed, and so there will be some discussion if that happens. But based on the previous list of things that would be required, other than what is now kind of a small, $10 a month sort of fee for licensing an apartment. In addition to that, sort of $10 a month, you're looking at the cost of the plans that would have to be submitted, plus the meetings and the time at perhaps hiring a manager, if you're not doing it yourself, to meet with the inspectors and walk through, and time that it takes to do that. There's certainly less in the Kingston proposal as it last stood than there are in some other cities, but that doesn't mean that eventually we're also worried about mission creep, that there's all kinds of other things the city already does to inspect and validate buildings. And now we're seeing the catchment of the kinds of apartments being broadened, which is, I think, a fair way to go, but also is going to affect more tenants in the long term.
Great, thank you. Councillor Bone?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you. You mentioned getting the raw data on the bylaws that we currently have and basically how they're being applied and the success that we've had with them. In your opinion, do you believe we already have the tools with some of the bylaws that exist? It's simply an enforcement issue. That would be question one. And question two would be, do you see these regulations and kind of bringing this in as something where good landowners or good rental agencies are already good rental agencies, they're already going to follow it, so it's kind of just increasing the burden on them, and bad ones are going to try to find a way to skirt the system? So are we kind of unfairly sort of imposing that system on people who, if you're already doing the right things, you're going to continue, and if you're not, you're going to try to find a way around this?
You're acting as my speechwriter at this point. It's I think you've identified a couple of things that we feel very strongly about. Good landlords are going to continue to be good landlords, and the folks out there who are playing dodgeball with the system, I mean, maybe you'll catch a few more, but they're still going to be playing dodgeball. So I agree with your comment, and I do believe that existing bylaws can be enforced more rigorously. I mean, I can drive around Kingston. It's not a hard puzzle to figure out where things aren't going right. I mean, we could go for a drive tomorrow, and we could just, from just the car, point out a couple of things, and we could send a bylaw officer over that day.
So it's more of an enforcement of existing ones. Okay.
And I don't want to duplicate existing bylaw infrastructure with new legislation that's ultimately going to land at the tenant eventually, or it eliminates operators. You kind of pick which way you want to go.
Thank you.
Councillor?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Kingston Rental Property Association, do you also represent short-term rental groups?
That's not our focus. We are a group of landlords who meet regularly to sharpen the axe and try to be better at what we do. And I don't have any short-term in my portfolio, and I can't think of anyone in our organization who does. It's possible that they do, but it's not the focus. We're only interested in, we don't have meetings about it, we don't have presentations on it, we don't do seminars on it, we don't speak to it, basically.
Okay, so your comment isn't about the short-term
No,
proposal in
we
here
are long-term,
whatsoever.
stable housing for our community.
And further to Councillor Bohm, would you be in favor of proactive property standards investigation?
I think it really depends on how the economics work, because what we have in front of us here will ultimately raise rents, and that's a bad news story, especially in a city.
Well, in terms that it would be to do with safety,
Sure.
that's why property standards would be there.
Are we thinking about something that's akin to the fire marshal's being able to enter for safety?
No, but as you know, it's bylaw property standards goes if there is a complaint, say from a tenant or a next door neighbor, it looks like somebody's creating an apartment. Whereas you could have proactive property standards where they do see where there's a bin outside and investigate.
Go take a look around.
So is that sort of what you're talking about?
You wanna?
I guess my feeling, just from the liberties of the people who are living in the apartment, for example, if there isn't a complaint, to have an extra layer of somebody just knocking on the door and saying, I have the right to enter, which I don't think you do under the Act, but I'd have to research that more myself. I think without a complaint, you don't really have a leg to stand on to go into a house or an apartment.
You're in favor of a complaint-based system now,
I'm not sure I
basically.
heard you. Sorry.
That you're in favor of the complaint-based system that we have now.
Okay, any other committee members? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your time this evening and for hearing us out. Really appreciate it.
Great. Our next delegation is Kim Wright, Vice President, Public Affairs, Hill and Knowlton Strategies, who is here to speak to the residential rental licensing.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for having me here this evening. I'm Kim Wright, Vice President of Public Affairs at Hill and Knowlton, which is a public affairs company. I oversee the Municipal Government Relations Program at Hill and Knowlton. Since 2005, I've been specializing in municipal government relations, dealing with regulatory frameworks, zoning issues, bylaw enforcement, and development applications in a number of municipalities across the country. I've been asked here tonight from a coalition of landlords and property owners that own small and large properties across Kingston, and they have some concerns about the rental property licensing proposal that's here today. We all agree that safe, legal housing should be the priority of everyone. What we don't believe is that licensing, as it's designed here in this report, will get to that. Licensing in and of themselves are not a panacea. What we've discovered in jurisdiction after jurisdiction that has done this is that it does increase the costs, and those costs are passed along to tenants. It does increase the regulatory burden on landlords and property owners. In fact, when we look at the city of Oshawa, their application alone is 44 to 58 pages, depending on the application. That's quite the regulatory burden to put onto landlords. The most pressing issue, as I've talked to a number of councillors about, is around availability and affordability of housing in Kingston. This isn't simply a student issue. This is an economic development issue. You can't attract new businesses if they have no place to live. You can't attract new tourists if there's no place for them to go. This is ultimately a livability issue. And that's what we need to start wrapping our heads around. This isn't about a license. That's not getting us there. What we need to do is talk about housing. So let's get this right. There's no rush. The staff report talks about 2020 before a licensing framework comes into play. We have time. Let's get this right. Let's get at the underlying issues that we're facing here in Kingston around housing affordability and availability. Licensing doesn't get there. The addition of the 4+ units also adds an additional regulatory challenge that wasn't talked about during the summer consultations, so those issues need to be sorted through as well. Even if tonight this committee and then council in a couple of weeks decides to hamstring the future council in principle by approving this report, what you're not allowing the next council to do is set their priorities around housing. You're putting them into a box that they would have to then undo and create new programs. Let's get this right. There are lots of issues to contemplate. What are the base cause of why you have such a tight housing market in Kingston? Is it because of the way the zoning applications have been across Kingston? Is it the fact that secondary units weren't allowed in some parts of Kingston and were in others, which creates illegal programs? Are you missing some enforcement tools? Does there need to be a reallocation of some of those enforcement tools? Let's look at some of those best practices across Ontario. Is there a need for better public education for both tenants, so they know what they can complain about to the city, and to landlords around their responsibilities? The inconsistency of zoning. But most important, as I've been going through the documentation around Kingston, is that you have a city center growth strategy and an infill strategy coming within 6 months. Why you would talk about landlord licensing in a vacuum when all of these other issues are here to be contemplated doesn't help you. There's also the issues around licensing versus registration protocols, and what happens if you reject a license that a landlord puts in because their zoning doesn't comply? There are all sorts of rules around that, and all of this needs to get back to a broader discussion around housing availability and affordability. You need to create a working group that works. What is before you today in this report gets to licensing. It doesn't get to housing. You need to develop a smaller working group to address these issues. We've seen this work in the city of Hamilton that has a smaller program. It's a subcommittee that actually reports to their planning committee. It also has political representation. That gives that accountability to it, but it's also about the people who are dealing with this on a day-to-day basis. And you can bring in others, like Queen's University, to talk about some of their issues. But really, this is how do we get to these underlying issues that are causing challenges in housing?
30 seconds.
Absolutely. So what I would humbly submit to all of you is that you refer this entire report back for two purposes. One, come forward with your Airbnb, the short-term rentals. Come back with a standalone report on that, also in the new term, and then come back with a standalone new terms of reference to get to housing. That this would be a committee of interested stakeholders, and there would be focused on the implementation and approach to the development, enforcement, and legalization of appropriate affordable housing. Thank you so much, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. Questions from the committee? Councillor Schill?
Thank you, Madam. Just to your last slide.
Sure.
You did talk about short-term rentals as a standalone report.
Yes.
But you've said to bring issues relating to short-term rentals, not licensing.
So there are a number of recommendations within this report, Councillor, that talk about short-term rentals. And I think when you have a report that has both short-term rentals and the rental framework, the rental licensing framework, it has muddied the waters a bit on all of it. And frankly, you need to deal with the Airbnb issue, as municipalities across Ontario and across Canada have been doing as part of that overarching discussion. But if you want to get at the Airbnb issue, deal with that. But it shouldn't be as part of this overarching framework. They are separate issues, and that's why I would suggest to you that staff come back with two separate reports, one immediately in the new term, and then the next, because we were running out of time in this term, and then one for a proper working group that works.
I realize what you're saying, but we do live in a city where the proposal is to license short-term rentals, many of which are short-term rentals in the summer, full-time rentals in the winter. So these same units that are full-time rentals, sort of, would be captured under this program. That's why I wondered why you called it issues, not the idea of licensing.
Really, it was more the all of the recommendations around short-term rent where it should be a separate report and separate recommendations than this broader issue of housing, which also is a broader conversation. And there's also different timeframes that staff have laid out in that to get to your point of how do you regulate Airbnb and short-term rentals prior to the summer months when they're most prevalent. Although, given the Briar coming here, I suspect they'll also be pretty prevalent around that. But those are two separate issues and should be dealt with. You have very quickly, I suspect, staff can turn around your Airbnb regulations and proposals early in the new term. I would suspect it for the first meeting because you're already thought process was 2019 for that. So this doesn't really impact your timeframes. What it does do is allow the next council the opportunity to have that conversation.
Thank you. I guess your beginning was about safe, legal housing, and that certainly will be what will happen with Airbnb and really in the long run with all rentals, because that is sort of the basis for all this. There are many other items that you brought up, but I won't.
But to that point, council, housing should be the aspiration of this, as should be housing availability, livability, and affordability. And what we don't talk about when we talk about licensing frameworks, frankly, in some of the questions earlier, how do you get at the bad actors who frankly have an illegal spot now, haven't done the work on a proper building permit, and frankly aren't going to walk down to City Hall and say, hey, I should get a license now. That's not what is the reality of how this is going to be. So let's have a reasonable conversation about the underlying issues that face people around housing and availability, and get to those root causes before we start talking about a license framework, because there's so much more work to be done.
Thank you. Councillor Straub?
Thank you. I have two questions. First one, I'm curious because you mentioned this, Hamilton with its subcommittee that reports to planning. Could you talk a little bit more about that, and what have been the subject of discussion, and what, most importantly, positive recommendations have they made?
Sure. Hamilton Council, when they decided for similar reasons that I've brought forward, to not move forward with a licensing framework at this time. They decided to go the subcommittee route. In fact, the language that I'm suggesting in this referral motion, or proposed referral motion, is very similar to the mandate of the committee in Hamilton. It includes 3 members of their council, it includes property owners, and they've got very specific people who are involved in the day-to-day of the issues, and then can bring in other people as required. So they're working towards bylaws and fees and processes and programs. That's what the committee mandate is going to be, and I suspect that will continue on as an ongoing conversation, both from a planning and zoning lens, but also what are their processes to get at proper landlording issues, and that's an ongoing discussion in the City of Hamilton.
Thanks. I noticed you tenants as part of that working group.
They absolutely should be. They should be part of that conversation, and why I left it purposefully in my remarks today was if the tenants were part of that conversation as you decide, as the working group composition in terms of reference comes forward to the new council, something that should be considered. But it shouldn't be considered in a vacuum of everything else that's happening. And one of the things that I saw in the working group recommendations in the report was frankly that it was a bit too broad. You're talking about far too many stakeholders to really get focused dialogue about what are the issues that matter. How do you do, if you do, proactive? What has been the experience in other jurisdictions? How do you implement public health into the conversation around tenant buildings? How do you do all of these things? But really, it needs to be a back and forth, real working dialogue between staff, stakeholders, and the elected officials who are ultimately accountable for any program that comes forward, whether it works or not.
Thank you. Second question is completely... you may not know this, you probably do if you've done all the research, but there's a history to this suggestion from staff for residential rental licensing, and the previous issue that sparked that suggestion was an interim control bylaw proposal that I wrote. You probably know that Ottawa passed a similar interim control bylaw last year, and I'm wondering if you have an opinion, because you're saying this is really about housing, not about licensing. Do you have an opinion about the interim control bylaw that was passed in Ottawa and the effect that it's had on their substandard housing sector?
So I haven't looked, to be clear, I have the Ottawa model just yet. That is part of my ongoing research on this issue. As I've told staff in the past, this is a program that I'm working through with our clients. But what I can tell you is that in a number of jurisdictions like Newmarket, where they look at a registration program versus a licensing program, they have an accessible dwelling units program. And what that program allows for, it's a one-time application. This may or may not work in the City of Kingston, but I think it's something worth exploring, that they go through and they have a registry of any unit that has an accessory dwelling. Now, that doesn't get to some of your shared issues, but we can work through those. People apply for them. There's a registry you can go on, and they also have a lovely customized decal that's a stylized N that goes on any unit that has multiple units. So this way, if there is, God forbid, it's some sort of an issue, and emergency services are called, that they know that there are multiple units within that dwelling. That's something to be explored that doesn't have the same legal ramifications as a licensing framework, and the same, if you don't meet these standards, if you don't meet these criteria, mandatory or not, how do you manage that? All of these things should be explored more deeply into a true working group model.
Okay, thank you. Any other members of the committee? No? Okay, seeing none. Thank you very much for the presentation.
Thank you all.
Next, we have Paul Martin, who is here to speak regarding the vacancy unit rebate and subclass reduction programs.
My name is Paul Martin. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of council, members of the community here tonight. The vacancy unit rebate and subclass reduction program is vital to the growth of commercial and industrial buildings in our community. We built approximately 25 years ago City Place 1, 2, and 3 on the corner of Sir John A. and John Counter Boulevard. It took us 10 years before we fully leased up the very first building. Without these rebates, we certainly would have not went ahead and continued to put office space on spec up. The reality is, when businesses look at relocating to any community, not just the city of Kingston, they're generally looking at 5 or 6 or 7 or even 10 different communities in which to relocate in. However, once they make their decision on where they're going, they want to be there yesterday. If you don't have available commercial, industrial space available for immediate occupancy, our community is going to miss opportunity. Lost jobs, lost revenue. The city did a survey on this vacancy rebate in which 310 people took the survey. Based on that survey, it was come to the conclusion that we should phase out rebates. Unfortunately, and again, I'll blame myself, as business people, of the 310 people, only 45 replied. Of residential property owners, there was 219. Unfortunately, residential property owners aren't necessarily commercial or industrial owners and don't totally appreciate or understand the ramifications of not being allowed this rebate. Initially, property tax was paid by the business that was in the particular space. Unfortunately, businesses went bankrupt and municipalities were left with unpaid taxes. The provincial government back in 1998 allowed municipalities to change it and put the responsibility back on the property owners. However, back in 1998, there was a 30% business tax charged on the business that was operating in a commercial space of 30%, and in an industrial space of 35%. So what the municipality did is said, well, if there's vacant space there should be a rebate given to that property because there is no business going on there. It's vacant. So this is this rebate that we're talking about. And if this municipality does away or phases out this program, you're certainly going to be discouraging people in the business community that build this product from building anything on spec. The other thing that happens, unfortunately, is that when you do get a tenant, and you maybe have had them for 5 or 10, maybe if you're lucky 20 years, eventually those businesses grow or get smaller or transition or go bankrupt. And again, you're left with vacant space. By not having this rebate,
30 seconds.
it's very difficult in which to continue to reinvest in your business, try to reinvent that old, dilapidated, potentially office space back into something new and fresh. I ask council to consider not doing away with this because I think the ramifications are going to be great for our business and commercial industrial community. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Questions from members of the committee? Councillor Bowman?
Madam Chair, and through you. So you just mentioned right at the end there about being able to kind of reinvest to reinvent that space. So you also mentioned something about when businesses want to come, they essentially kind of want yesterday. So you have to speculate a little bit. Would you think that if we went ahead with this, that perhaps we could inadvertently create the same crisis we have with the residential vacancy, where we're going to have a lot of businesses that maybe want to come to Kingston, but there's just no spaces for them? Because basically, nobody's going to build extra space now because there's no rebate for that if they can't rent it right away. So that what's built is going to be smaller, there's going to be less availability for businesses, and developers are not going to go out there and build larger spaces with the risk that nobody will come and rent it without this rebate.
Good question. I think what you're going to find is that no one is going to build on spec. People are going to wait until there's a client or a tenant that is willing to sign a long-term lease. And I think this community is going to miss a lot of opportunity because businesses don't wait. There's lots of other communities to go to.
So inadvertent end up almost stifling our own economy to grow right now. Is that what I'm hearing?
Exactly.
Okay.
You'll stagnate.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any other members of the committee wish to speak? Councillor Stanek?
Thank you, through Madam Chair. Mr. Merton, we had only 45 business owner landlords actually responded. How do you think we could have, like the city, how we could have better consulted? Like, how should we have done it? Should we have gone through the Chamber of Commerce? Would they have had a list of all the business owners? So if one of the problems is we want to hear from more business owners, and tonight we have, correspondents saying, oh, I only found out about it today and or this week, and the chamber is saying, oh, just recently we've had several members express concern that they haven't been adequately consulted. How can the city do that better consultation before we might decide?
That is a phenomenal question because I go to a lot of meetings. And unfortunately, tonight is a great turnout. There's lots of people here. Normally, there's about 5 or 10 people. And 5 or 10 people, from what I'm observing personally, are making a lot of decisions for this municipality. That said, I don't know what the answer is. I know once it starts to affect people, they'll jump up and down and go, yeah, why did you do that? The problem is you need to be here now. And I really hope that council and staff are listening to what we're telling them. Because sometimes I go to these meetings and I give my input, and then it's like no one listened. And, I think you've turned off some people in the past where they've said, you can't win anyways. But I haven't given up.
Great. Councillor Camden?
Thank you. Do you have any knowledge, just from your own experience, of what breakdown or demographic of commercial owners are in the city. I feel like a lot of people assume all people who own commercial real estate have unlimited funds. It seems to be the discourse a lot of times. Even residential landlords, they just assume everybody's rich, they're huge corporations, whereas in residential, I know a lot of the market's made up of people who own 3 or 4 houses or 1 or 2 houses, and that's their net worth, and they don't have a huge amount of money. The thing I'm worried about is the fallout of the people who don't have a ton of money, who invested everything they have into a commercial building. Do you know the demographics in Kingston of how that breaks down, or have any insight on that?
Well, you know, it's interesting. I don't necessarily have demographics or estimate of everyone's, kind of net worth, but I do know this, that businesses today, more than ever, are being challenged with increased costs. And it's not just from tax rebates, it's everything to be it licensing, community benefits. There's all kinds of different costs, additional costs, and I don't think our community totally understands or appreciates the costs that are being relayed to not just the business people, but to everyone using those services. Look at our homes, look at our unit or our rental rates. They're going through the roof, and the reason they are is that, in my humble opinion, we're not controlling our costs enough. We seemingly want, be it more licensing for residential units, community benefits, all of these things are adding to the cost. And I kind of think, getting back to your point, for businesses, we're all struggling. I don't care how big or small you are. I look at Lowe's, they're cutting back. They're not as profitable as they used to be, and that's a big one. But, smaller people in our community, we're struggling.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions in the committee? Okay, seeing none, thank you again for the presentation.
Thank you.
All right, so Councillor Bowe? Yep, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, myself, seconded by Councillor Cannon, that Clause 2.17 of the City of Kingston Committee Procedural Bylaw 2010-205, as amended, be waived in order to allow Peter Rubens, resident, to speak with respect to Gordegger Downey Pier and Breakwater Park. Thank you.
Excellent. So this is a motion to move the bylaw to waive the bylaw, in order to allow another delegation. It's moved and seconded. All those in favor? Excellent. Great. So I would ask Mr. Rubens, please.
Good evening, Council. My name is Peter Rubens, and for the past 30 years I've lived at 265 King Street West, directly across the street from the park and pier. It's at my doorstep, and I am arguably impacted more than anyone else by visitors to the park, as I see and hear virtually everything. As some of you may know, I spoke at Council in 2016 in support of the Waterfront Master Plan and focused my comments on what was then the proposed reconstruction of the park. I heartily endorsed it as a way of reconnecting not just local residents, but all citizens of the city with their waterfront, and this included students. It was a way of making our waterfront relevant again, and the result was something spectacular. People come from far and wide to enjoy our beach, not just Kingstonians. We're a destination for sun seekers. In fact, we've been a topic of conversation on several CBC radio and global TV programs, in print media and in advertising. And I'll just show you this. This is my PowerPoint presentation. This is the perspective folder, a marketing folder that came out last Friday in the Globe and Mail. And you'll notice on the cover here, it's a little bit small, but on the cover are some Kingston, well-known Kingston business people and city employees standing on the pier with a Love Kingston, and I, being the I here, is my house directly behind the I. So, currently Swim, Drink, Fish Canada are using this park as a model for other community waterfront projects. And unlike Sugar Beach in Toronto, Gord Edgar Downey Pier puts people in water. Was it a success? You bet. But are we now the victim of our success? Well, sort of. Parking, garbage, pedestrian crossings, and now noise are concerns. Some of these should be addressed, but others, such as the proliferation of garbage, are frankly over-exaggerated. The focal point this evening is the petition to shut down the pier at night. Shutting down the pier will not stop the noise, nor will it result in increased safety and less park damage. In fact, it may exacerbate some aspects of safety. The video in the petition exaggerates the number of people that visit the site. This large grouping is observed under ideal conditions, hot, sunny, summer daytime conditions. At night, the numbers are significantly lower. The perfect conditions I described are rare outside summer. More often than not, the weather dictates the park's popularity. Park visitation and consequently the noise has already dropped significantly over the past month due to the cold, wet conditions and will remain low until spring. Does this guarantee no one will visit the park or engage in activities which may constitute noise? No. But the weather will reduce the number and volume of activity both day and night. Shutting the pier off is problematic, as access to it is as simple as jumping into the water from the beach and swimming over to it. Attempting to fence off the pier will not only look hideous and unwelcoming, but will only prove a minor setback to those who are determined to use what is, after all, public space. Furthermore, by closing the pier, all you're really accomplishing is to move the potential noise 40 feet closer to shore. So do we put up yet another barrier-like fence? Well, we've already done that. You may recall the Berlin fence, a phrase mocking the closure of the western end of the park. Though it's temporary, I see that unwelcome eyesore daily and witness the dangers that it created. Safety is always a concern. Whenever you mix people and water, there's risks, such as the recent death of a man along the shoreline of Navy Bay. Life rings are provided, warning signs proliferate about water conditions, and we cannot ignore the fact that common sense and personal responsibility must prevail. And while student activities may be the aim of this closure, many others use this park for quiet nighttime walks. Are you going to refuse them access as well? Accessibility for EMS was mentioned as another reason to close the pier and move visitors closer to the road. There are no issues concerning accessibility to the park. I have witnessed police motorcycles, cruisers, SUVs, even horseback access all points of the park. City maintenance trucks, ATVs, and ambulance have also been seen in the park driving on the paved surfaces. Clearly, access is not an issue. However, if the pier were fenced off and access to the pier was an emergency, would this significantly reduce response time, potentially contributing to a fatality? So what do we do? Well, let's not be hasty in our response. The park has only been with us for over 3 months, and already we're talking about shutting it down. These are early days, and our actions must be measured.
30
At this
seconds.
point,
Sorry, 30 seconds.
okay,
please.
only a few seconds more. At this point, the park is new and exciting, and we may expect the bloom to come off as people see and experience it and then move on. We will still see sudden bursts of activity like Frosh Week and end of exams and long summer weekends, but currently a response to the noise, such as the occasional police presence or bylaw enforcement around these critical dates, can be very effective. I watched 2 officers at 11:15 gently encourage people out of the park, and they obligingly complied. More visible, targeted signage can be very effective. Increased lighting and notices indicating the area is under 24-hour surveillance are deterrents. Can we ever completely erase the noise by simply closing the pier? No.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. Any questions from the committee? Councillor Stroud?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Rubens. And I know your house, and I know how close it is, and your unique perspective. And I was wondering if you could just give us your observations, the pier prior to the improvements, prior to all the waterfront master plan, and the point that you said you advocated in favor, prior to that point, and the appearance and use since, and also where your how did that interact with your expectations? Were you pleased or not about the outcome and the way things are at the moment?
Well, Councillor Stroud, that's before I would say that Individuals like myself, I lived in the area for 60 years, frequented it fairly regularly. Students also frequented it. There were parties, very few people, lots of swimming and lots of activity. Now, since the improvements, obviously, as the video had shown, people have really enjoyed it in the daytime. At night, also, they really have enjoyed it quite significantly. There has been an uptick. There has been a greater number of people using it. But as I said, it's early days. And I really want to see if this same kind of activity at this level continues. To answer your second question, believe I understood the question. Do I enjoy it? Do I find it a really good reconstruction of the park area? Absolutely. I understand the noise. I understand the excitement that people have. I've seen things that you would not believe, and I accept it as part and parcel of this absolutely fantastic park. The only problem I have is that I think we've put the emphasis on traffic on King Street to the detriment of safe crossing of King. And the reason I say that is because right in front of my house, the corner of Collingwood and King, I see people frequently trying to cross traffic, and what we've done is we've put the emphasis on crossing at the bottom of Beverly Street. Not ideal. But I think it's a wonderful thing, and I love to see all the people, and believe me, I'd rather see more people in traffic down on that waterfront. And right now, we're getting there.
My second is, I think you got to it in your presentation, but vis-a-vis the suggestion of the fence or the blocking access at night of the suggestion of the previous delegation, you spoke about the current measures and how it's early days. So are you saying that essentially give it time, and with the current enforcement measures and the security cameras and the public notices and all the different safety measures that are there, that give it time and the population will adapt to safer behavior?
Yes, the bloom could wear off the roads pretty darn quickly. Lots of people wanted to see it. When the park was under construction near its completion in July, I regularly saw, and this was many times a day, people breaking down the fence to get into the park and to enjoy enjoy the sand, enjoy the pier. They wanted to experience that. Sorry, your question succinctly
is it just a matter of measures before?
Yes, I really do think so. As I said, 3 months enough to really give it a proper judgment.
Thank you. Any other councillors? Okay, so thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
All right, so that ends the delegation portion of the meeting. The next item of business on the agenda, we have a briefing. Paige Agnew, Director of Planning, Building and Licensing Services, is here to present regarding residential rental licensing.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Happy to be here this evening and be reporting back on the proposed rental licensing program that my team and I have been working on for just over a year. In terms of the briefing tonight, because I have done an extensive briefing before this committee just a couple of months ago, my comments tonight are really focused on explaining the recommendation that staff's put together in the comprehensive report that will be considered by the committee. Certainly we're here to take any questions as well. Again, just going back to residential licensing and what it is, a number of the speakers really illuminated this in their conversations as well, but it's really about safe, affordable housing, legal housing for everybody in the community that requires it. And that's really the focus of the residential licensing program, the impetus for it, and what we've put together as staff for council's consideration. And again, really protecting the health and safety of persons that are residing within the units, looking at a proactive approach to addressing illegal units. Again, talking about what have we been doing as a community. A lot of our tools to date have been more reactionary or complaint driven. We've seen them to be fairly ineffective relative to the overall concerns that have come forward related to safe, affordable, legal housing in our community. So again, staff trying to look at a proactive approach that goes with our overall proactive enforcement program that we've been implementing over the last 18 months across the board. And then also, one of the key pieces that was brought up by a former speaker was, do we really know what the housing inventory is for the city of Kingston? And the actual truth is, no, we don't. What we know is vacancy rates related to CMHC information that looks at 4 units or above. So the category that the residential licensing recommendation that's before the committee is really looking at trying to better understand that housing inventory by developing an inventory that we can use to look at what the housing supply is at any given time and really understand that component of our housing market a lot better than what we do now. Just building off the impetus again of why we're here tonight, this is looked at again as part of a larger suite of recommendations that came forward as part of the interim control bylaw discussion that happened in 2017. So again, residential licensing isn't being looked at in a singular format. This is a series of recommendations looking at housing generally in the city and housing concerns that have been brought forth by members of council and the community. So we've been actively working on all of these recommendations, residential licensing only being one of those. And our commitment was to come back to the committee in the summertime after consulting with the community and looking at a residential licensing program. This is something that the city's looked at on 2 occasions in the past, and council decided not to pursue it at that time, but it came up again. And the reason why I'm telling you this is because other cities are facing the same issue. Many of them have looked at residential licensing in the past, and I will speak to that in a future slide, and some of them are now looking at it again. So it seems to be something that, despite best efforts and other tools put in place, cities like the city of Kingston continue to struggle with safe legal housing in areas of their housing market. And as staff, we've really tried to listen to all the feedback that we've received to date and specifically look at how to design a program that will work for the city of Kingston and is responsive to the feedback that we've heard over the last year. Again, just in terms of a quick summary of public consultation, we have had a lot of conversations, and certainly as part of discussing this is not an easy issue. It's a contentious issue in the community. It's one where there's a variety of opinions that have been offered. And as city staff, what we've tried to do is listen to all of the opinions that we've heard and try to devise a program that really speaks to those concerns as they've been identified. And it's not a singular type of concern, it's a complexity of concerns. So we've tried to be responsive in the recommendation we've brought forward this evening. There certainly was an earnest commitment during the consultation process from a number of people in this room relative to the interest in a community-based working group. That forms part of the recommendation that you'll see before you tonight. And also specifically, you'll also see that we did not at this time bring forward an implementing bylaw. And that's a really important consideration because before any type of program of this nature can be enacted, it has to be enacted by a bylaw of council. So part of the intent behind the recommendation was to look at, can we establish a community-based working group? Can we form partnerships to have the conversations we need to have about housing? How does this relate to residential licensing? Are there mechanisms, feedback, things from a practical implementation standpoint that we can work through at the working group level and work together on a program and the details of the program in a comprehensive way that will be brought forward at a future date through the bylaw? So I just want to make sure in terms of the recommendation, it's really clear that the reason you don't see the bylaw attached to staff's recommendation, that was very intentional. Again, we've heard lots of things across the board, and I think we heard some of them again this evening. Certainly, we've heard from people that were in favor of residential licensing because they feel that it will adequately address or at least more proactively deal with the issues of safe and legal housing in the community. We've definitely heard from landlords that want to make sure that the licensing is done equally across the board, that it's not in a certain type of housing or another. definitely concerned about the negative impact on smaller landlords and on the rental housing market. And we've tried really hard to look at other partner municipalities that are going through similar processes as the City of Kingston, or maybe a little bit further ahead from where we are right now, and ask some questions about, have you seen an impact on your affordability? Have you seen impacts on your rental vacancy rate as part of implementing these programs, and factoring that into the analysis that we've undertaken as staff? Definitely the concern that quote unquote bad landlords would still continue to operate illegally, and what do we plan to do? Because a rental licensing program in nature is it's something where people have to come forward and be part of that program, or else you're chasing them through enforcement. And that's an element of the program that we've taken time to consider what that would look like from a staff perspective. Again, focusing on cost. So months of analysis, building a costing model, looking at how could we devise a program that has the minimal inputs that gives us the information we need to determine whether a unit is safe and legal. And we went through a lot of analysis in devising that list. We presented some of that information in the summertime and in September. And relative to other communities that have residential licensing programs, the draft framework that we put together is quite minimal compared to what other cities have asked for in terms of information. So again, looking at trying to make sure we're only asking for what's absolutely critical, nothing superfluous to the process. It's really about what information do we need to determine if something is safe and if it's legal. Since the time that we were here in September, we have had consultative conversations with the Ontario Human Rights Commission. This is something from a discriminatory perspective. Issues were raised by members of the community feeling like our program could be determined to be discriminatory in nature in one way or another. Because we've targeted looking at only certain elements of housing, and we've done that again using the data to understand where are the complaints, where are we seeing multiple issues across the city, where do we know there to be issues based on 10 years of historical research for the city. And that was really telling us the housing in the 1 to 3 units was one of the greatest areas of concern. We also heard specifically about older units or older buildings that had greater than 3 units that maybe predated site plan control or some of the other tools we have under the Planning Act that help to regulate these matters. So you'll see that folded into the recommendation that staff has brought forward. Again, that's coming directly from us responding to the feedback that we received through the consultation process. The Ontario Human Rights Commission, they've reviewed the information that we've put together. We shared it with them, and what they identified to us over the phone is that they wouldn't specifically be reviewing our bylaw, although we're not presenting one at this time, but they had no concerns from a discrimination perspective because there were a number of things that specifically as a city we were not doing that other cities have done relative to minimum separation distances, bedroom caps, per person floor area requirements, things that we have purposely left out of our program. The program, from their perspective, they determined that it's not intended to adversely impact one group of tenants or another. And our city-wide phased-in approach, they didn't have any issues with that, again, from an overall discrimination perspective. Just again, our commitment to looking at best practices in other municipalities, and certainly this is something that we've been undertaking over the past year. There's a couple of updates that we've been able to obtain since the time that I was before you in the month of September. Specifically, City of Hamilton, I wanted to provide an update on the city. That city has been referenced in many of our consultations as a city that's doing good things. Let's follow what the City of Hamilton is doing. We definitely looked at their structure of their working group and putting together the structure that's before you tonight. And interestingly enough, they have been working with a housing subcommittee for a period of time, and that subcommittee has now come back to recommending residential licensing be considered by their council. So that's a recommendation that their city planning committee is going to be considering in the month of December, and something from a staff perspective that certainly we're going to continue to follow quite closely. Also, the City of Ottawa, relative to some comments that were made before about their interim control of bylaw and what they're doing, the City of Ottawa is looking at an overall framework for regulating rental accommodations in the city, which also include Airbnbs and hotels. So again, from a best practice perspective and watching what other cities are doing, city staff will continue to monitor that. There isn't any additional update that has been provided since the RFP that went out, but we are in regular communication with them. So the timeline for this evening, as I said, we've gone through this process really since 2017. We're almost a year at working on residential licensing this time around, and the report is on the floor tonight from staff to Administrative Policies Committee. Depending on what the committee decides to do, City Council will make the final decision related to this matter. So the summary of the recommendation, again, just wanting to go over it, is that we are looking at short-term rentals, and you'll see that in the staff recommendation tonight. So formerly they're known as Airbnbs, but we refer to them as short-term accommodations. So what we're suggesting is that the city move forward with a program regulating short-term rentals, and that will be back before the committee with the implementing bylaw in 2019. We're also recommending support for a residential licensing program for 1 to 3 residential units, boarding and rooming, lodging houses, and those containing 4 or more rental units that do not have a site plan control agreement in place. And again, on the timing of that, focusing on the rental licensing working group and the commitment that was made through that consultation process, giving us 12 months of time with city staff working collectively with community partners to exchange ideas and look at best practices and specifically get into some of the more detailed implementation strategies, including incentive programs for landlords, potentially support or different types of funding pools that could be available, grants, for example, that could support people going through this program as well. And these are the types of ideas, as well as information coming from other communities like the City of Hamilton, the City of St. Catharines, that are going along at a similar pace to the City of Kingston, and making sure that the information that's being developed in other communities is also brought and worked through and vetted with the working group. Just reminding the group again of the costing model, the numbers look a little bit different than what I presented in September because we had made some additions to the program for the 4 and more units in particular. And again, that coming directly from feedback that we received from the consultation process of why you're seeing that in the recommendation tonight, but you didn't see it in September. One of our focuses has really been on looking at trying to create a program that is as inexpensive as possible and manageable as possible for rental landlords across the city. We're suggesting a 5-year phase-in. So that would be something that every 5 years you're getting a residential license for your unit, not on an annual basis, and really trying to make sure in terms of the costs that you see here, this is a self-sustaining program, so the fees generated are intended to pay for the staff time associated with administering the program so that there isn't a contribution from the tax base in the way that we've developed the strategy here tonight. And then also looking at the number of additional staff that we would require to implement the program as it's presented to the committee and council. The residential licensing working group, we have put together a mandate specifically and an overall membership that we would like the committee and council to consider. And as part of the nominations process, similar to any other working group or standing committee of council, that goes through the nominations committee, which are made up of members of council. So this group specifically, what we're looking for is to provide feedback on the draft rental licensing bylaw. Once we establish one, again, we're not bringing that forward tonight. We want to do that through consultation. Investigating options and incentives to recognize compliant property owners and support other property owners to bring them into compliance. Contribute toward the development of an implementation plan, as I mentioned before, example, phasing strategies, specifically looking at the supporting documentation that would be required as part of the rental licensing program, and then specifically also looking to provide advice, recommendations related to education programs, communications to assist with the implementation of the residential licensing program, because again, building on the consultation program that we undertook as part of this work, we really heard that education and awareness are things that are lacking within the community related to safe and legal housing, and how can we do a better job of putting that information out there, educating landlords and educating tenants about what to look for related to safe and legal housing in the city. This is the composition that we've put together relative to the working group. Again, building off the work that's been done in the city of Hamilton, looking at the city of St. Catharines as well. Those are two partner cities that were raised through the consultation process, specifically from some landlord groups as cities that were getting it right and doing it well. So we were looking carefully at those as we were putting together the composition. We were looking at trying to make sure that the size of the working group was representative of different types of perspectives on housing specifically, but if something gets too large in terms of the number, would it become unruly and unmanageable and difficult to get people to meet? So that's where we landed in terms of the overall membership. And again, looking at spending a lot of time over 2019 working collaboratively with this group to help inform the final program that would be implemented through an amending bylaw. The next steps of where we are, and again, this is really looking at, there's two parts to the recommendation. The short-term rental licensing program, this is where we're recommending that as part of the 2019 program that we bring forward the implementing bylaw to council for consideration and the development of the application process and hiring a staff, that would take place in 2019 specifically. And the second part of the recommendation is looking at the overall residential licensing program, and again, looking at 2019 really being the opportunity for the establishment of the working group, and all of that time in 2019 working through those implementation details and those consultations, and ultimately looking at a implementation with a bylaw to look at phasing in the program as of about the Q2 or Q3 of 2020, and then that would be for a five-year phase-in and a 5-year renewal cycle for residential licensing. I'm happy to take any questions at this time or when the report hits the floor.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Questions from members of the committee? Councillor Stroud?
Sure. You did go over this, but I just wanted to clarify. So we often hear, we've been hearing for a couple of years now since the first report, or at least a year anyway, the 0.7% vacancy rate that was mentioned. And I remember at council I asked Commissioner Hurdle about this, and it's not a complete class. I mean, it's not all of the housing stock. Can you explain the number that we do know about the vacancy rate and what that signifies? And the one that we don't know, which you mentioned in your presentation, which is also the subject of the RRL.
Sure, thank you, and through you, Madam Chair. The rental vacancy rate that has been widely publicized for the city it comes from CMHC information, and that's really looking at units that are 4 units and more. That's what they capture. They don't capture very well the 1 to 3 units. And again, as part of the recommendation that staff has put forward, we want to understand that component of our housing market a great deal better than what we do now. It's very difficult to manage a city housing supply when you're driving sort of with one eye closed. You know, one component of your housing inventory, you don't know the full picture, which is why we want to, as part of this, develop a comprehensive inventory of housing of units of that size so that we can better understand that and we can better understand what the overall vacancy rate. It's entirely possible, based on the lack of information that we know, that the vacancy rate for units of that size could be less than 0.7%, it could be more. And the difficulty is that there are so many units in the community that are illegal, and by virtue of them being illegal, they're not on our radar. We don't detect them because they don't technically exist in any records that we have.
Right, so we call that the black market. The question that I have, the next question that I have is you also covered in your presentation, but the common suggestion that what you just said, the illegal housing market sector would remain that way even under residential licensing, because by nature these are people that are avoiding their own self-reporting. And so you've identified it as an issue, but is there anything concrete that can be done about that persistent problem?
I think that's a great, and from a staff perspective, through you, Madam Chair, sorry, that was something that we really grappled with. So from an implementation and an enforcement perspective, there were two options. There were lots of suggestions that came up through the consultation. Add more people to your enforcement, have more boots on the ground, have people more aggressively pursuing enforcement. And what I would say in the last 4 years of me working for the City of Kingston is that may be a good idea in theory, but I don't feel that this city at this time is ready for an aggressive program of that nature. Because really what that would be is having people going house to house, knocking on doors, asking to see, the number of units, the conditions of units. And again, we would never enter a property without the property owner's consent, but outside of developing a proactive strategy through a bylaw, that would be an enforcement mechanism that would be available to the city. But relative to the way that we do business and our focus on proactive enforcement, education, and friendly compliance-based approaches, I felt that would be inconsistent with the direction that we're trying to go. So that's a challenge in itself. The other thing that we thought about relative to an overall citywide program is the peer-to-peer influence and the peer pressure effect of our landlords that are working within the program and doing the right thing. Are they more incented to be working with us to identify where they know to be illegal housing and things that maybe right now on their own they're not doing, but if they're going through a program because they're good landlords anyway, are they going to work beside us in compliance or through the working group to develop ways of detecting the illegal units? And then therefore we would take more of a targeted enforcement approach that doesn't involve more boots on the ground and going street to street, house by house, which was one of the suggestions that came forward during the consultation.
I get from your answer the suggestion that the good landlords are harmed by this, but the bad landlords go unpunished. There's also the aspect of if you're proactively, or if you're doing targeting proactive enforcement where you're perceived as hostile city workers intrusively going places and investigating and so on, that would also negatively impact good landlords because they'd be subject to this targeted investigation and that hostility for really as a kind of collateral damage to I'm talking about a different approach than residential license. Like if we went a different way and just targeted and investigated and tried to bring people into compliance by force, essentially, that would also have the negative effect of collateral damage on the landlords that are actually in compliance.
That's correct.
Thank you. Councillor Shaw?
Thank you, Madam. Could I just ask if for short-term rentals, it will be the same set of property standards, building standards for those rentals as would be for a regular landlord under this licensing program? Short-term rentals don't get a special type of property standards that they have to meet compared to straight residential licensing.
That's correct. So relative to the regulation of them and focusing on safe, affordable, legal, we're looking primarily at, the zoning. Is it a permitted use? And has it been created legally? And is it compliant with the Ontario Building Code? So those are the focuses. It's, from a property standards perspective, there are elements of that can factor into it, but the real focus is Ontario Building Code based from a safety perspective.
Great, thank you. And on another point, you'd mentioned that in some cities, they have some incentives to help landlords come into compliance. Could you describe what some of those are, please?
Absolutely. Through you, what we've been looking at with the City of Oshawa, we've been looking at Waterloo. We've looked at the whole range of cities that we've referenced in the report. We have seen programs that have demerit-based systems for people that are repeat offenders of bylaw infractions, maybe construction without a permit, different types of things where it's more of a negative-based 3 strikes and you're out type thing. We've also seen programs that are more incentive-based. So if you've gone through the program, you've gone through a period of time or whatever the renewal cycle is without any type of infractions or issues, do you have a more short-tracked approach to renewal of that? Is there an auto renewal? So we've seen some approaches based like that. Certainly Commissioner Hurdle and I during this process, we've been batting around ideas of grants. Is that something that's available to us? As you and Councillor Stroud would know, through Heritage Kingston, we do have grant programs associated with helping people maintain the properties. Is that something that could be available to the municipality, especially for those that are specifically running units that are available more to the vulnerable housing sector? We're working with our partners in the housing department as well, specifically looking at the vulnerable housing sector in particular and looking at the affordability issue. And those folks as well would continue to work with us through the working group process.
Thank you. Any other members of the committee? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much. Okay, so we will now move to the first item of business on the agenda, which is item A, tax write-offs pursuant to the Municipal Act. We have a report from the CFO and City Treasurer, and if you would like to speak to it, go ahead, Ms. Kennedy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the report before you tonight is similar to the other ones that we've had this year. This will be the last one for 2018, and it provides in the schedule a list of properties that we're recommending for tax write-off. The total amount totals about $13,000, of which about $9,500 relates to the municipal share and the remainder to the school board share. Those amounts have been provided within the operating budget. There's a tax provision, and so they'll be reported as part of the 2018 operating balances.
Thank you very much. Members of the committee? Okay, seeing none, members of the public who did not speak in the public meeting, if you wish to speak, okay. Just find a microphone right there is great. There's a little button. And if you could please give us your name, address, sir, thank you.
Hi, Martin, I'm a broker, a real estate broker here in Kingston, and a landlord for over 20 years. I've got some concerns about the licensing, rental housing licensing.
I'm sorry.
This is only comments related to the report that's on the floor right now.
We're getting there. We're really, we're not that far off, actually.
Okay, so we can still talk to that?
Not at this moment, but stay right there. We'll get there. Okay, so this is on item A. Any members of the public wish to speak to item A? Okay, seeing none. I would ask for a motion to put this item on the floor. Thank you, Councillor Neal, or sorry, Shell. Seconder, please. Councillor Sanik, excellent. Any further comment or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Carries. Thank you very much. So the next item we have is the 2018 External Audit Plan. And this is also a report that's provided by the CFO and City Treasurer. If you would like to speak to it, please, go ahead.
Thank you. So the report before you is summarizing the 2018 External Audit Plan. You will recall that we have KPMG appointed as our external auditors, and they have actually started the 2018 audit process. As part of that, they do present to you an audit planning report, and that gives the members of the committee an opportunity to see what the plan is that KPMG has developed, and if you have any input and any questions to that. So in that regard, we have Lori Huber here, who's the partner with KPMG on the audit, and Lori's going to go over just a summary of the audit planning report that was attached to the committee report. Thanks.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Good evening. I'll walk you through the highlights of the report, as Desiree has mentioned, and certainly happy to take any questions, and I will try to be quick. So page 3 of our report speaks to the executive summary with respect to our audit plan and approach. And just a reminder there, our audit approach very much is a risk-based audit approach, and we assess risks annually and develop our audit plan in accordance with those that are identified. So as a reminder here, in terms of any specific financial reporting risks, our risk assessment has not changed from past years. Some of the things that have changed this year on page 5 of our report, I've touched upon the new financial reporting system that was put into play at the city in 2017. So that's something that we've stayed in touch with very closely and have worked through that through the course of the audit, and we will continue to do that again this year. I've also outlined some of the changes with respect to accounting standards that are coming into play for this fiscal for the city as part of an attachment, and we're working through with the team as well in with respect to each of those. And there have been no changes to auditing standards relevant to our audit from a professional standpoint this year. Some of the other items in the report speak to materiality. Again, no change from previous years. And the components with respect to the consolidated financial statements for the city, none of those have changed this year as well, and we audit a significant number of those. So I think that in summary is our audit plan for 2018. Are there any questions?
Thank you. Questions from members of the committee? No? Okay. Thank you very much. All right. So we now, yes, this is item B still, and any comments on this? We're still talking about the external audit plan. Members of the public? Seeing none. Oh, sorry. Yes. Just go to the microphone, please, sir.
I just wanted to ask, what threats or opportunities are there for the city that you see in this?
Of course, there we go. Financial reporting perspective, we have not identified any specific financial risks to the city as part of our audit plan.
So there's none?
From a financial reporting perspective, no.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so now we'll move back to the committee members. Can I have a motion, please, to get item B, please, on the Councillor Arsenik? Thank you very much. Seconder? Councillor Candon, thank you. Any further discussion on item B? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carries. Thank you very much. Okay, so now we are moving to item C, which is the residential rental licensing. So the process for this will be the same. We will begin by hearing from the Commissioner of Community Services. If no, staff would like to speak. Anything further? Okay. So then next we have members of the committee. Any questions?
Oh, members of the committee.
Committee, sorry. I don't see any. Okay, excellent. So next, we will move to members of the public. If there are members of the public who wish to speak to this, there are microphones available at some of these chairs. Just please move over to the microphone and identify yourself. Name would be great. We'll start with you, sir. Yeah.
So go there and then.
Yeah.
Jordan, just turn your mic.
Great.
Thank you. Sorry about that previously. Martin Spilchin. I'm a broker here in Kingston, a real estate broker, and also own rental properties. I have 4 doors. So I feel that the rental licensing really both affects me, and it will affect untold numbers of tenants that are around the property, around Kingston. We have so many illegal units around Kingston. You look all through Waterloo Village, just about every second bungalow semi-detached has a basement apartment in it. I know, I've seen them. There's hundreds of them around. If this goes through, it not only will affect those people, it just to make a unit legal, it can take up to $20,000 to $30,000 just to retrofit a unit to make it legal. We're going to kick out those people just to make them legal, and if the landlord decides not to go ahead, they're just going to sell off their units because it's going to be a big headache for them. We have untold numbers of newcomers to Canada over the next several years. We have 286,000 people that came to Canada in 2017. 2018, the target is 310,000 people. And going forward, there's a target of 340,000 people by 2020. That's the annual immigration target, and I don't know what it is thereafter. Since 2015, we welcomed approximately 50,000 Syrian refugee families into Canada, with approximately 400 families settling into Kingston. I don't know the exact number, but I was sitting beside a member of, a community member, but also works for the city at one of the Kingston rental property owners meetings, and that's what his number was. So if you take the 50,000 people and the 400 people that came to Kingston, that's approximately 0.8% of the Syrian refugee families that ended up coming to Kingston. If we carry that number forward of the 310,000 people, that if we take 0.8% of those people, we could see up to 2,480 newcomers to Kingston alone. We need private investors now more than ever. And if you do this, it's going to scare a lot of those private investors away. There's a lot of money sitting on the sidelines right now that I've seen. I've talked with my colleagues. They have buyers out there waiting to buy, but they're waiting to see what's going to happen with this. And they're scared. They don't want to be involved in this. It is a big headache for the good landlords. We already comply to everything. It's absolutely, you need to go after the bad landlords. There's no two ways about it, but there's got to be a better way. 2011 was the first year more people retired than in any other time in history. That's the baby boom generation. We now have the millennials, and we now have this refugee group who are all looking for rentals. I know numerous retirees that are looking to sell their homes, and they can't sell their homes because they have nowhere to go to get into a rental property. We have a housing crisis on our hands, and this will only make it worse. There is no way that this should go ahead. I'm worried for the tenants. I'm worried for the landlords, but more so for the tenants. And we are simply just not going to be able to accommodate all of these people. The city needs private investors now more than ever. And we also already have to deal with the Rental Tenancy Act, the Ontario Human Rights Code, municipal bylaws, and the Disabilities Act as landlords. So adding another layer will only make things worse. Already people are fed up with the Rental Tenancy Act and the Landlord Tenant Board. We have a shortage of 10 adjudicators across the province right now. 10 full-time adjudicators. It is horrendous to be heard at one of these boards.
30 seconds.
We have little time to talk here, but anyways, getting things done at the Rental Tenancy Board is very difficult. This will only exacerbate things, and it'll make it a lot worse. Anyhow, any questions?
Thank you. Yeah, so I'm sorry, I should have explained at the very outset. So we will have 5 minutes from each member of the public who wishes to speak. I'll remind you of the time at 30 seconds remaining, and then we will hear from staff if they would like to contribute a response at some point, but at this point we'll carry on. Staff wish to address this now, or did you want to speak to any of it? No? Okay, so we're just going to carry on. We have another speaker over here. You please give us your name, sir.
Hi there. My name is Jordan Van Luken. I work for Braybury Properties, and I'm here to speak to you on behalf of our rental department. We have concerns that the proposed residential licensing program will ultimately lead to higher market rents for tenants and push tenants from being able to rent in the most desirable areas such as downtown. The big issue is not only the proposed licensing fees, there are also rising property taxes, and with the proposed bylaw, time will need to be taken away from providing services to tenants that now will be directed to servicing the city. These added costs all will be borne by the tenants through higher market rates. According to the Landlord and Tenant Board and Residential Tenancies Act, there is no limit on what vacant unit or available unit market rent can be set at. On average, our tenant only rents for about 3 years, and in the downtown, about a year. So with the current move-outs and new tenant turnover, new tenants will have to pay for the city licensing program directly. In the end, it will be the tenants that the tenants in Kingston paying more for added government jobs, pensions, and increased regulation through higher rent rates for the same unit. We feel that it's important for us to focus on providing repercussions for the landlords that are breaking the law and not for Kingston's tenants. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members of the public wish to speak? Okay, great. Just your name, please, first, if you wouldn't mind.
There we go. Good evening. My name is Lindsay Foster. My husband, Lawrence Van Weingarten, and I own rental properties in Kingston. All but one is located in the Inner Harbor area. Lawrence bought his first property nearly 40 years ago, and since that time has continued to skillfully revive neglected buildings to create safe, legal, and affordable rental properties. We are not a property management company. We are a mom and pop shop that does all the maintenance, repairs, and administration on our own. Our properties are outside of the catchment areas for Queens and St. Lawrence, so we don't typically rent to undergrads. We don't rent rooms. We don't offer short-term rentals. We offer affordable housing for our tenants who reflect the diversity of that area. Families, seniors, retirees, professionals, nurses, grad students, service industry staff, and individuals on social assistance, to name a few. Our vacancy rate is 0. And when one of our tenants moves, we rarely advertise vacancies because our current tenants connect us with their colleagues, friends, and family for new tenancies. These referrals reflect the type of properties that we own and the fact that we are simply good landlords. This is our livelihood and our reputations are paramount. To us, residential rental licensing would be a nightmare. First, the administrative burden. The City of Kingston plans to hire additional staff to manage this new bureaucratic wing. We as landlords are not in a position to do so. Under this proposal, completing site sketches and floor plans for each unit of each property will be an onerous task. Professionally rendered sketches and floor plans will be an additional substantial cost. Further, this plan calls for a site inspection. Will this be a property standards inspection or a building inspection? These are two very different departments in the city. While all are well maintained, the majority of our properties were built in the early 1900s. If a ceiling, window, or door height, for example, is less than what's set out in today's building codes, will property owners be required to make changes to comply with current standards? If so, there is no way to predict the time, resources, and funds required for upgrades. Second, the cost. While city staff believe that the licensing and application fees are proposed to be low, these are still costs above and beyond what we are already paying in excessive property taxes. The city's annual increase is 2.5%, but the reality is much higher. Because of continually inflated impact property values, our average taxes jumped by over 10% last year and nearly 7% this year. Over the past 2 years, we've seen increases as high as 18.5% at some of our properties. Add the cost of licensing to the equation, and the city will be forcing our hands to pass these extraordinary costs to our tenants, whose annual rent increases are currently no higher than the 1.8%. We have never applied to the Landlord-Tenant Board for rent increases above the provincial guideline. Why? Because we provide affordable housing. What was the #1 issue touted by every candidate in this year's election campaign? Affordable housing. When's the last time this city built or offered affordable housing? Who does? Rental property owners like us. So while the current council and the new council can continue to grandstand on this commitment, bylaws like this cut us all off at the knees. My husband and I are currently assessing our commitment to providing rental properties in the Inner Harbor. This should be a major concern for city staff and council because we're not alone. In Kingstown District, over 71% of privately owned buildings are rental properties. As the neighborhood evolves, the demand for housing in the area climbs, not rental properties, but owner-occupied. Buyers want single-family homes close to downtown. We recently put one of our rentals on the market. It sold within 2 weeks to a family relocating from the East End. So we are left with a couple of options. We could pass along these increases to our tenants and chip away at the whole concept of affordable housing, Or we could sell our entire inventory. We currently have 68 rental units. 64% of our buildings are single-family homes. New buyers won't be renting these out. They'll be moving in and eliminating a chunk of the available rental properties. As for the multi-units, new owners will jack up the rents, again, chipping away at the concept of affordable housing. This is a threat to the city, a reality that will continue to erode the rental market and push down the vacancy rate even farther. Instead of targeting landlords, the city needs to improve and enhance current property standard staffing and resources and work with tenants and tenant groups to raise awareness about the existing resources for unsafe units through both the city and the landlord and tenant board. As far as building a better rental stock database, the city and Utilities Kingston need to be able to share property information, and we all need to push the province and in turn MPAC to take steps to actually update its unit and occupant database.
30 seconds.
One final point, if this moves forward, the proposed working group composition needs to better reflect those stakeholders who will actually be paying for this program and know every single property around every single one of their own units. Having only 2 out of the 11 people at the table representing all affected landlords is not only unfair, but ineffective. Their expertise would be invaluable as the city moves forward with this so-called collaborative partnership. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry, folks. Another thing that I should have mentioned at the outset, we don't have applause during our committee and council meetings, I'm afraid, but thanks for offering your sentiments. Okay, any other of the excellent of the public, please go ahead and give us your name.
My name's Jay Patry. I own a number of single-family homes, multi-res buildings, and some larger buildings. I'm very concerned about this on a number of fronts. In the last little while, we've decided to add anything that doesn't have a site plan agreement to it. And this is something that caught my eye today. About 16,000 of the 24,000 units are going to be affected by this rental housing. And with the increases in taxes that we're seeing, we're looking at whether or not we're going to do AGIs. We've never applied for AGIs, so above board increases. And when we add this rental housing cost to it, we will be increasing our cost to our tenants. We're going to apply for an AGI and we're going to have to pass it on. I also fear that when you guys build this whole program on $750,000 worth of income, myself and my colleague across the way will take a look at it and say, well, we don't have a site plan agreement on our thing. How much does that cost? I've got a 50-unit building, no site plan. I go through the numbers and I say, you know what? For 1 or 2 years worth of costs, I can eliminate that cost in perpetuity. We will do that. So I think you're building a program on false numbers. You expect to get $750,000, but when the landlords that are large actually do the math, they're going to do site plan approvals, and you're going to eliminate 10,000 of these units from your base to collect money from. So the other 6,000 are going to see costs increase by 300% to cover for that. The other part that's not talked about is the illegal units, and everybody says illegal units are bad, and in general, I completely agree with that statement, but one of the things we need to remember is there can be an illegal unit that is actually fine to operate, or that may exist for a reason that's not the landlord's fault. The first building I ever bought was in 203 Colburn Street when I was 22 years old. I got a zoning compliance letter from the city that said the sixplex I was buying was legal. On the very bottom, it says, you cannot rely on this zoning compliance letter. What did I know? I kind of thought if the city said it was legal, it should be legal. Fast forward about 12 years, and somebody says, you know what, your building's only zoned for 4 units, and you've got 6. And we downsized it to 4, and we've been going through a ZBA application to make that proper. In the last couple of months, we've had to alter that application, I think 4 times, and postpone the planning committee meeting for it. We're very good at our job, and we have staff that can do it. But if you're a single-family landlord and you're getting stuck with this cost and without the expertise, it's going to sink you. This particular building that I'm fighting for a unit of 5 bedrooms on, right now I'm probably at $25,000 in costs. And I'm going to have to rip the entire roof off the building and increase it 2 inches. 2 inches. But I do the math and I know what those units are worth. I have to do that. So in this particular case, it's an A-frame roof and there's not enough square footage. It's been there for at least 30 years. It's been operating as such. So I think the city needs to understand how many illegal units there are and what their plan is going to be for it, because there's going to be a math equation that everybody's going to do, and they're going to say either they can afford to do it or they can't. And if they can't, then they're going to shut that housing down. And that housing is often the most affordable housing in the city. You've got cellar bedrooms. You're one of the few municipalities that has a cellar law. So if 50% of the window is not below or above grade, then it's illegal. And when you start to dig into a lot of these places, you're going to find a 7-bedroom house maybe has 2 bedrooms that are illegal. You multiply this across, and you could find 1,000 people that are living in illegal units, or 2,000 people, and what's that going to do to our base? It's going to erode it. The other part is this bureaucracy for the sense of bureaucracy? If we're really worried about the tenants, educate them. Put up billboards, send out flyers, like continuous things on social media saying, we're here, we're going to answer your calls. If you have concerns about your landlord, call us. Here's what you should expect. Put a website out there that tenants can go to educate them, and that will be enough to draw them in. On the side of short-term housing, I can't understand why it's cheaper to run a business than it is to run affordable housing or housing in general. So people that are Airbnb are competing directly against your hotels. And you're going to give them a tax break, plus you're also going to give them a cheaper licensing fee. And I think they're the highest risk things. If somebody's in your house for one night, they don't know where the exit is. They don't know if there's fire code issues. They don't know if their smoke alarm works and all of these things. I think when you're looking at the short-term rentals, I would suggest you look at a city like Canmore that has short-term rentals, and they have a really simple system. If you want to do short-term rentals, great. We'll do an inspection. We're also going to charge you a commercial tax rate. And they have an enforcement policy that says, if we catch you, we charge you $5,000. And all they do is they look on Airbnb and find out who's renting and pull their database. In short, I think that tenant education would be sufficient to do this, and I really wish you guys would just push this along so we can investigate it a little more, because the addition of this 10,000 units, I think, is false, and it won't stay there. Thank you.
Thank you. Great. Okay, so over to you.
Thank you for allowing me to speak tonight. I'm Truesdale. I'm a member of the team at Homestead Land Holdings. Homestead Land Holdings? Oh, sorry. And we're here. I'm representing Homestead tonight to speak about the landlord licensing program. We've been involved with the city in the sense of providing consultation on this program throughout the many avenues we had over the last year and a half. And listening to the speakers through the report that city staff published last Friday, there's one serious component that has been overlooked in this whole thing. And it's actually at the provincial level and how the relationship between property tax increases and other charges relate. And one of the things that's being overlooked is that if you look at how property taxes have increased over the past 3, 4, 5 years, there's a system at the provincial level that any property tax decreases over a certain rate are passed on to tenants. Any property tax increases over a certain rate are passed on to tenants. So anything that is 1.5 times guideline within the city of Ontario, within the province of Ontario, so if you have an increase in property taxes over 2.7% because guideline is 1.8%, then anything above that is passed on to tenants. And with the addition that we've seen recently, first and foremost, we don't believe in rental licensing. We're in 13 municipalities across Ontario. We've seen this come up in different municipalities. There's a reason that this is only done by a minority of municipalities in Ontario. It's fraught with legal challenges. And the big aspect always comes down to what is the cost to the tenant. And if you look at how that key component of municipal tax increases and other charges relate together, they're not separate aspects. It's not in a vacuum. They're put together as one when they're analyzed by the province. And so what happens is if you look at I pulled a few of our buildings today, and if I looked at some of the tax rates that we've seen increases from 2017 to 2018, and if I look at the addition of over 4 units with no site plan agreement, which City of Kingston has had multifamily housing for a long period of time. We own a lot of buildings that don't have site plan agreements. And the majority of those buildings are older buildings. They're usually the more affordable buildings. So if you look at a unit that is an average rent of $1,000, I looked at one of our buildings, just took a cross-section. Because there was a tax increase over the 2.7%, The amount that the tenant is going to be paying extra is $18 a month because it's a 1.8% increase just for taxes. The amount that the tenant, in theory, would pay because of the additional charge for this licensing bylaw would be an extra $7, give or take, a month. That's probably on the low end because there's probably other aspects that would be included within that. And then on top of that, they're paying an extra $18 because of the guideline increase of 1.8%. So on a $1,000 a month rent, that tenant, in theory, is going to be paying an extra $43 a month. To me, that's not fair. It's by bringing forward this program, you're putting these costs back on the people that are relying on that affordable housing. And at the end of the day, it's fine to say that, yes, we're trying to minimize the cost, but there's a reason the City of Toronto, when they brought in this program, they only did it at $10 a unit, is because they didn't want this scenario to happen. So again, I think we have to think about what is the effect on the global scale. You can't just look at it as this is only going to be an extra, $6 or $7. This is part of a greater realm, and I can tell you the way taxes are increasing, because the property taxes are going to be over the 2.7%, 100% of these landlord licensing fees will be immediately placed back on the tenants. And to me, that is not something that is fair. I think there's a solution to this problem, and there's a lot of municipalities that are looking at these issues. But again, I think you have to look at what are the majority of municipalities in the province of Ontario doing, and they're not doing rental licensing. There's a reason that the City of St. Catharines has canned rental licensing.
30 seconds.
So at the end of the day, I don't think the council should be voting this through tonight. I think, honest to God, this needs to be looked at, because I'm shocked that that relationship between how the province deals with this and that connection has not been made, because it has serious ramifications on the tenants within this city. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members of the public wish to speak? Okay, seeing none, we are now going to no, okay. So, members of the committee, can I please have a mover to put this on the floor? Thank you, Councillor Osanek, seconded by Councillor Stroud. Great, thank you. Any discussion? Councillor Osanek. Shell.
Thank you. Just a question again to staff that under residential licensing, the building code in effect, the date the property became a rental is the building code standard that would be, the property would be compared against?
Through you, Madam Chair. Yes, it would be the date that the rental unit was created would be the date that would have to meet the code at that time. So we would use a Part 11 provision because the building, if it was over more than 5 years old.
And could I just, into what someone mentioned, the business of windows, basement windows, it isn't to do with the fact of being 50% above grade. The egress windows in basements have to be the size that a human being can get through. Isn't that there's a standard for the size of window in a basement in a rental?
Yes, Madam Chair, yeah, there's a minimum size under the Ontario Building Code for an egress window in a basement.
And in a regular, a basement window can be just a little tiny window. It's only when you turn it into a bedroom that's for rent that it becomes an issue, the size of the window.
Through you. Depends on the situation. If it's just a basement apartment, only one window in the basement would have to meet the egress requirements, not every bedroom.
Okay, thank you. Any other members of the committee? Councillor Osanek.
Thank you, Madam. Since we do have the municipal accommodation tax on our hotels right now, I do want to see the short-term rental portion of tonight's report go forward. And so, Madam Chair, when we do vote I want to see if we can separate and vote first on clauses 2, 3, and 6 of the report, and then vote on the other clauses separate when we do the voting. And if I could continue with giving my comments. Since we do have, as council, we have some reports that have still yet to be heard and coming forward with the results of the strategies, right? We have the North Kingstown strategy, the Central Kingston growth and infill strategy. We still have to see the results of the zoning bylaw consolidation come forward. And for those reasons, I'm a little bit reluctant on voting for the licensing portion of the report tonight. But right now, if we could have clauses 2, 3, and 6 separate when we vote on them, because they deal with the short-term rentals.
Okay, great. So we'll first just check with the committee to see if there are any more comments, and then I will separate those, and we will vote first on the separated ones, 2, 3, and 6. So Councillor Stroud, and then Councillor Schell, please.
Okay, so to confirm, are we separating the debate as well, or we each get one chance to make comments on the whole thing, and then when we're separating at the vote? Is that right, Mr. Clerk?
So at this time, still open to debate. Councillor Rosanek had requested the separation, and once the debate is done, we can deal with the separated items and then move on to the ballots from there.
Okay. Okay, so the first point I'd like to is that this is not a new problem, but it is a problem that many municipalities are struggling with. When the first step, of course, you identify that you have a problem. So the problem is unsafe, possibly incompliant, is that the word? Uncompliant? Non-compliant units. Housing stock that's not only possibly non-compliant, but it's also unknown in scope, and like how bad the problem isn't even known. We just have anecdotal evidence that it exists. And I think we can all agree on that point, that there are units that are below the standard of what we would like to have as our minimum standard for housing in the city. So if that is the focus of the debate of how to deal with that problem of non-compliant units, or units that we honestly think are below livability standard that we all have, we need a solution. So rental licensing is proposed from staff, and the timing of it was because of the interim bylaw proposal. To remind everyone here, that was to do with housing built form. So there was a type of housing that was prevalent in my district especially, but also in Councillor Schell's and Councillor Neal's, that was when you supersize a home, or when you put a so-called monster addition on a home, you have now have so many bedrooms that really it only will be used for multiple rentals, multiple people renting together, and that built form was singled out as a problem because of a real issue that happened in my district. And so that isn't really addressed by rental licensing specifically. So we actually have 3 different problems that we've identified. One is a problem with the built form, which I would call the monster home edition issue that the interim control bylaw sought to address. The second one is the non-compliant housing issue, and if we agree that we have a housing crisis, that's a big part of the crisis, that we have a bunch of people living in rentals that are below the standard of what we would like to accept. We just don't know how many. And the third problem is, as Councillor Rosanek mentioned, also separate, which is the Airbnb or short-term rental, not so much a problem, but an issue. We've passed the 4% accommodation tax for the hotels and the B&Bs, and we're giving a 4% competitive advantage to the non-regulated Airbnb type short-term rentals. So that, in my mind, is most time sensitive. I think we should deal with that tonight. I agree with Councillor Rosanek. The built form and the substandard housing, if we don't move ahead with that tonight, we have to at least acknowledge that something needs to be done. So there's been many suggestions tonight from members of the public that what needs to be done is something other than residential licensing. But we don't actually have enough useful suggestions that would get at the problem of substandard housing. And I'm tempted to think that actually going back to the built form approach, which is you put a freeze on a certain type of monster home edition and only on that type, might be the way to go. That's not subject of this report, so we can't talk about that any further. I just want to point out that should we end up back at that point, part of the reason is because we have not made any progress on how to deal with the substandard housing piece. So with that being said, I think there is a number of items of correspondence in the addendum we received possibly today that wasn't addressed to councillors by email, so we've actually haven't read all of them. That's another reason possibly for deferral, and also to be able to digest the comments made and the inevitability of receiving further comments from members of the public as this goes forward. I don't think we're ready to make the decision on that tonight either. So I will look to one of my colleagues that possibly has written a deferral motion, but that's all I have to say for now.
Thank you. Councillor Shell?
Just to comment on this, I think one of the things I wrote is we haven't had any ideas from anyone how to tackle the substandard housing in the city of Kingston. And this has been an opportunity to be told. I mean, you all know we're struggling with this as councillors. You all know what happened during the election and the discussions. You know that it's an issue in the city. It's an issue for the students. It's something that we have been asked to deal with as a council, and we're not getting any help here, and we need it. Because so far, what we're getting from staff is what we've asked for is a solution, which is licensing. And I haven't heard an alternative. And I certainly want to continue the process to licensing, certainly short-term rentals, which will capture quite a number, actually, of student-type rentals anyway. It will begin the process, which is something I really appreciate. But I want to continue with the whole licensing program because it's not going to go away. I agree that the pressure is on, and short of the city becoming a residential property developer, which I'm sure nobody's in favor of, we want people to build. And we keep approving buildings that then get appealed. So there's definitely that push from this council to build. But there is also a big push from the population to get in some way to take care of substandard housing, of which we know there is a lot in the city of Kingston. So I really want to continue absolutely the short term and also continue the licensing program. But I'm one voice. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bone?
Chair, and through you, I think some of the concerns we've heard here tonight really know how valid they were until we implemented this. So some of the concerns are maybe the costs are going to be passed on to the tenants. So we go down this road and then it happens. Where do you go then, right? So it's kind of one of these things where I'm not 100% sure what the right answer is. As Councillor Shell said, we have an issue here. We don't really know how to solve it yet. And we're looking for solutions. We have a solution proposed in front of us. I'm not sold that this is the best way. When I see what Guelph did up there back in 2014, which was proactive enforcement, collaboration, community education, partnership education, I'd much rather go down that road to having people, if it's a complaint-driven system, then educate people on what's a legal unit, what's an illegal unit. I think with the cost of this, at the end of the day, you can sell it, you can spin it however you want, but the tenant's going to pay that cost. It's going to get passed on one way or another. So that's my biggest problem with this, and my biggest concern is we do have an affordable housing crisis in the city. I think this may trap a few of the people who are not following the rules, but I also think that it puts an unfair burden on the majority of people who are following the rules. And I've never really been in favor of a system where you increase regulation for the people that are following the rules and following the laws and doing everything right, to try to trap a couple percent that aren't. And those percent that are not following those rules are gonna find ways around it. They're not gonna come in and volunteer. Nobody's gonna come in and say, I have an illegal unit, I'm gonna all of a sudden register it because you now have a licensing agreement. What's gonna happen though is the people that were doing everything right are gonna have one more burden on their plate. And then I believe that a comment was made earlier that people are just gonna get rid of the units and sell them, and that's just gonna exacerbate the issue. That's kind of my thoughts on this, which is why without more information, I don't feel comfortable really making a decision in favor of this evening.
Okay, thank you. So we've heard from members of the committee. I will now move on to the separation. So we'll begin with clauses 2, 3, and 6. So we'll be voting on those. I'll read them out so everyone knows. Yeah.
Why one isn't one just relates to short-term rentals? That number 1 is recommended to council that a licensing program be established for short-term rentals. So that's number 1. Is that okay?
Can we have staff's input on clause 1?
Okay, so if we could hear from staff on including clause 1 or not, if the intention is to try to separate the short-term, the direction of rental licensing. Oh, go ahead, Commissioner Hall.
Thank you. And through you, yes, you are correct. The first clause actually is also related to short-term rentals.
Okay, so we separate that one, Councillor Stanek, is it? So you'd like to also separate 1?
Yeah, there's no amendment required.
Sure.
It's just, again, a separation at the consent of the committee.
Okay, so we'll be voting on clauses 1, 2, 3, and 6 now, and they...
Hang on, Clerk, is there any way of getting it up on the screen, the recommendation, so that the public can follow along now that we're separating?
It would take me a couple of minutes, but I can do it if the committee...
Yeah, well, also my computer died, so I don't even have the recommendation.
If the chair will allow it, it'll just take me a minute or two to get it up on the screen.
Okay, while you do that, I'm asking for a short comfort break.
I wanted to give myself some lead time.
Okay, so we now have the recommendation on the screen. I'll also read the parts that we are considering at this point that have been separated that we will deal with first. Okay, so clauses 1, 2, 3, and 6. First, that it be recommended to council that a licensing program be established for short-term rentals. Second, that staff be directed to report back with a short-term rental licensing bylaw in 2019. Third, that staff be directed to report back in 2019 with amendments to the municipal accommodation tax bylaw to include short-term rentals. And then number 6, that staff be directed to include the costs associated with implementing a short-term rental licensing program and a residential rental licensing program in the 2019 budget declarations. Do we need to remove that final bit? Yes. Okay, so the intention, I believe, Councillor Osanek, is to separate the two issues. So do we need to strike this last part of clause 6 that refers to staff providing costs associated with residential rental licensing? Yes. An amendment. So we want to amend, and Councillor Shell moves that, and Councillor Osanek seconds it. So now we're amending clause 6, and we are deleting after program, the short-term rental licensing program. The rest is going to be removed.
It's just that one phrase.
Yeah, so leaving in the budget deliberations part, making and a residential rental licensing program.
Just to be really exact, we probably should have a 6A that probably will be defeated, but to keep the motion basically the way it was, that we should have a 6A that staff be directed to include the costs associated with implementing a residential rental licensing program in the 2019 budget deliberations.
Okay.
That would create two that clauses that can be voted on.
Do you understand,
That
Mr.
would-
Clerk?
that makes it to be
We
really
need two, one for short-term for residential licensing, so that we can deal with them separately.
Okay, so just to clarify, and maybe we'll get this written out just to clarify it rather than relying on my interpretation, but this clause 6A would then be would be separated out from this portion. We'd be creating a new one and then considering it with the balance, or considering it on its own.
I understand that the intention is that anything to do with residential licensing is one vote, anything to do with short-term is another vote entirely. Is that correct? Yeah.
Okay, that's what we're attempting to accomplish here. So
Yeah, so I would move that we add a 6A clause, as stated by Councillor Shell, that says that staff be directed to include the costs associated with a residential rental licensing program in the 2019 budget deliberations.
in writing, please,
Yes.
if you could just do that, thank you. This is what we call policy on the fly. Okay, so we're now voting on, that we did have a motion to amend on the floor, moved by Councillor Schell, seconded by Councillor Osanek. We're going to proceed with that, and that motion to amend includes striking the latter portion of Clause 6, and then we will continue on with a new version of that clause. So just so everybody is clear, I've read through them all already, and Clause 6, the amendment that we're actually talking about is to strike the latter part, and so Clause 6 now reads that staff be directed to include the costs associated with implementing a short-term rental licensing program in the 2019 budget deliberations. Any further discussion on that? Okay, so we're now calling the vote on clauses 1, 2, 3, and 6 as amended. Oh, on the amended. So
the amendment to 6 moved
right.
by Councillor Schell, seconded by Councillor Osanek.
Excellent. Okay, so voting on the amendment to clause 6. All those in favor? Opposed? Carries. Thank you. Okay.
So no, now we're back to.
Okay. Now we're going to vote.
Balance the 1, 2, 3, and 6 as amended.
Right. So now we are voting on clauses 1, 2, 3, 6 as amended. Any further discussion?
Just a point of clarification. So voting yay or nay to the recommendations on short-term rentals?
Yes.
Short-term rentals?
Yes.
This is short-term rentals.
So if you have any further comments on... No. Okay. 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 It's moved in. All right. So all those in favor? Okay. Opposed? Carries. Great. So now we're going to move on to the balance, which first we've got to...
The new numbered one.
Right. So the...
We want to add this into the balance.
Yeah, so the motion to add 6 written there?
Right. So
We'll renumber appropriately, but yes.
this is now a motion to amend that's been moved Stroud, seconded by Councillor Schell, to add a clause to clause 6, that staff be directed to include the costs associated with implementing a residential rental licensing program in the 2019 budget deliberations. So that's been moved and seconded. Any discussion on that?
Well, just, it was Council's suggestion, because we separated and that clause actually applied to both pieces, so we had to duplicate that clause for the second part. So it's really a procedural amendment to make sure the original recommendation is intact.
Great, okay. So, any other discussion on that amendment? Seeing none, we'll call the question on that. All those in favor? Opposed? Carries. Excellent. Now we are on to the balance.
Which includes the newly passed recommendation from Councillor Stroud.
Okay, so this balance includes the amended clause. Councillor Sanik?
So, Madam Chair, now I would like to moved by Councillor Osanek, seconded by Councillor Baum, that clauses 4, 5, 6A, we just added, 7, 8, and 9 of tonight's report, AP 1806, be deferred until the completion of the current secondary planning studies and zoning bylaw consolidation.
Okay, so we have a motion to defer, so...
Sorry, clarity on deferrals back to the administrative policies. Can we just get that clarity?
Okay. Okay, so if we could just, we need the deferral to include where this will end up.
Back to Administrative Policies Committee.
Great. Okay. Councillor Schell, is this to time? Okay.
There is no time in that one. It's when some reports are done. Should we find out when the reports might be done so we get a more accurate idea of time?
Sure. If we could hear from staff. Commissioner.
Thank you, and through most likely 2020 or 2021.
Okay. Any further comments? Time and place? Okay. Seeing none, call the question on the deferral. All those in favor? Opposed? Carries. Thank you. All right. So that is business item C. Thank you very much. Okay, so now we have item D, which is vacant unit rebate and subclass reduction programs. This is a report from the CFO and City Treasurer. Any comments? Go ahead, Ms. Kennedy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will try to be brief, but I thought it would be important just to walk the committee through a bit of the timeline on this process. I know there was a lot of information in this report to get through, and so hopefully I can just provide a brief summary of that and why we're here tonight with this particular report. So just stepping back, we were in front of the committee about a year ago in November of 2017, talking about the vacancy rebate program. And in that report, there was quite a bit of information about the background of the program. And the program has been in place since 1998. So there was some information about why it existed at the time and some of the changes that have happened throughout that. As I said, it is a 1998 program. It was put in place, as we heard tonight, at the time that the business occupancy tax was basically abolished and added in as part of the broader tax for commercial and industrial properties. And at the time, it was realized that if a property was vacant, that we normally in the past would not have received that business occupancy tax, and so there should be some sort of a rebate program to address that so that the property owners were not paying that component if the property was vacant. There's been a lot of reform to both the assessment and the tax systems over the years. And so about a year ago, a little over a year ago, the province had done some review on the program and had some input around that changes had been made in the last 20 years and that some of these initiatives were no longer in alignment. And so the province had made a change that would allow the municipality some flexibility to make changes to the program just a little bit over a year ago. So right now, as you know, the program is currently for commercial properties that have a vacancy of at least 90 days. There's a 30% rebate, and for industrial properties, that's a 35% rebate. So part of the province, in terms of allowing us some of this flexibility, there was some specific direction in terms of what the process would be, and we brought that to the committee about a year ago. And a couple of things that had to happen. First, there had to be a consultation process, so that was a requirement of the province that we needed to do that with the business community and with the population in general. And then the second thing is there's a process subsequent to that if council approves any kinds of changes, that we have to make an application to the province for that. So it's not a done deal. If council approves it, we still have to put it forward to the province. At this point, there is not a timeline in 2019 to take that forward. We expect there will be a timeline that will happen. There will be a deadline for that, but the province has not announced that at this point in time. So in terms of the consultation process, so over the last year, probably, and I think we were done probably about 4 or 5 months ago in the consultation process. So we did have a couple of open houses. We had an online survey, and you'll see some of the results of that in the report. In addition, we did have some one-on-one conversations and some correspondence from individuals as well. So, and we did do a mail out to everybody that had received a vacancy rebate, I believe in the past 3 years, I think it was, to notify them that we were doing this consultation and the ways that they could provide input on that. So as a result of that, so we did get that back. We have included a lot of that information in the report for the committee members to see. We are making a recommendation tonight in the report on a couple of things. One, we are recommending that we phase out the vacancy rebate. And that we phase that out, so it would not change in our recommendation. The vacancy rebate would still be eligible for 2018, which means payments in 2019, so we wouldn't see a budget change in 2019. The following year, we are recommending a 50% phase out, so the percentages would drop to 15% for commercial and to 17.5% for industrial. And then the other part of that recommendation is the other piece of the program is the subclass reductions. And so that's for excess land in terms of the assessment. And that was the second part that we were eligible to change. There certainly was a there hasn't been as much change that we've seen in the municipalities in regard to that. We haven't also seen a lot of movement on the province with respect to what they're doing on the education piece on that. And so that's why our recommendation is that we just continue to review that and that we don't make any changes to that at this point in time. So just going back to why the recommendation in terms of the vacancy rebate. So a couple of things that we've noted in the report and some of the appendices that we've added. We are kind of at the tail end of this. A lot of municipalities have already been through this, and that is not a mistake. That was certainly planned because we did want to see where this was going across the province. So in your material, you'll see that there's the province provided us an update as of March 2018. That there was 46 municipalities that have made changes to the vacancy rebate program. Some to the subclass, but the majority are dealing with the vacancy rebate program itself at this point in time. Of that 46 municipalities, they represent about 2/3 of all the business properties in Ontario. So one of the things that we have been seeing from some of the communication coming back from the province is that the importance of a consistency and maintaining a competitive market across the province. So for us, looking that this is happening in quite a few municipalities, certainly was one of the factors that we looked at in terms of making the recommendation. The other thing that we looked at was the province's move and the decision that they've made to eliminate the education component. So the province also funds a similar rebate on the education tax side. And they initially had said that they were going to look at aligning that with the decisions that the municipalities were making. But subsequent to that, as they saw the decisions that were coming that the majority were phasing out or eliminating right away, they've now said that they will also be taking steps to eliminate the education portion beginning in 2019. Now, it does say that they will consider continuing to align where decisions by municipalities have been made, but otherwise it will be being phased out. The other piece that I just wanted to make note on that we've looked at is some of the changes over the years on the assessment side. So as you know, MPAC is responsible for setting the assessment on these properties. And for those commercial industrial properties that are assessed based on an income-based valuation as opposed to a market value valuation, there is a vacancy factor that's built into that calculation. For those particular properties. It tends to be around 6 to 7%. However, a property can apply to have that factor increased, and it can be up. We do have some properties that are receiving a vacancy factor of about 20% if they have a chronic vacancy, and that's defined as a vacancy that is greater than 3 years. So there was some concern that these programs were not aligning with some of the assessment tax policy that's been put in place within the last 20 years. And then the final thing, just in terms of the recommendation and some of the support to that, is that there is also the ability, and we had a report on tonight for the Section 357 tax write-offs, so there is the ability for a property owner to apply for an assessment reduction where they're going through a renovation process, and we've seen that on those reports. So that will still exist going forward. So I just wanted to give that brief outline and sort of get you up to where we were today in terms of the recommendations that are before you.
Thank you very much. Any questions from the committee? Councillor Stroud?
Yes, Madam Chair. My question is to do with our status as a so-called lame duck council with the budget pieces. This is a budget reduction piece that would be phased in the future and not even in the 2019 budget year. But what is the rules for making decisions, large budgetary decisions, at a point at the end of term like we are right now?
So, Madam Chair, so this will not be changing the 2019 budget, and it would be a budget reduction. So I don't think there's, and I certainly refer to clerk if there is anything, but I don't think there's any concern in respect to that timing. We would be looking, so 2019, there would be no change to the budget. 2020 would be a reduction in the budget of about $450,000 to $500,000 at halfway, and then about $900,000 in 2021. So those budgets would be before a new council at that point in time.
Yeah, okay, so the 2019, if passed, the recommendation does not change the budget. Nothing changes for the owners either, but it's the halfway phase in 2020 where it first would impact the budget in a sense that it would reduce the budget requirement by almost $500,000 and then by almost $1 million the following year. So this is years 2 and 3 of the next council that we're talking about budget implications for. I just want to point out that those are large numbers that we're looking at. That's my only question.
If you, Madam Chair, that's correct. You've got that exactly right.
Thank you. Councillor Candon?
Thank you, and through you. So you said the revenue was roughly, did you say $500,000 and $1 million phased in?
Yes, through you, Madam Chair. So right now we budget about $975,000 cost in the budget. So for 2019, that would remain, and then that would be down to about $450,000, $500,000 in 2020, and then down to zero in 2021.
Okay, what is the, so choices, we can do this or not do it. What is the reason for the recommendation to do it? Is there a need for us to do it, or is it just we're doing it because other people seem to be doing it?
So I think really for us, in terms of the recommendation, there is not a need to do it necessarily. I think the fact that we do have the majority of municipalities that have basically 2/3 of all business properties have done something, either already have it eliminated or phasing it out. So from a business competitive standpoint across the province has said that they want to ensure there's some consistency. So I think that would be the one point to consider. The other point to consider is that we do have some crossover in tax policy. So we do have properties that can apply for this increased vacancy factor. So they're getting a break through the assessment side, but they also can apply through the vacancy rebate program. So there's just some tax policy that hasn't lined up as the changes have been made over the years.
Okay, and is the goal, if this is implemented, is to lower the tax increase for the rest of the community?
So I wouldn't necessarily say that. Certainly that would be a result of this recommendation.
So future councils would go from 2.5% to say 2% on a tax increase annually because of this?
It would, once it was completely phased in, it would be approximately just a little bit under 0.5% tax increase.
Okay. I almost wonder if there shouldn't be something attached to this to say that the tax increase goes from 2.5% to 2% because we just took a pile of money from a group of people in order to reduce the taxes. Because the question is, if you are taking in a huge money from a select group, what do you do with it, right? Like usually if you want to buy something, you figure out how to pay for it. This is the opposite, where we would be taking a huge amount of money and not knowing what to do with it. It's just something to consider because it is an enormous sum of money that would be coming in. Even with the thing I had a conflict on, these two items could represent enormous amounts of money for the corporation of the City of Kingston that would be coming to us from the people who elected us. I think that might be my last question. What is our current vacancy rate, just so the people here can find out what the commercial industrial vacancy rates are in the city?
I didn't have available.
Thanks.
Great. Okay. Questions from the committee? Councillor Sanik?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Page 177 on the report So it looks like there's 75 properties in 2017 that get the vacancy rebate. Is that what that's showing, that chart? So the vacancy rebate applies to 175 properties last year in 2017?
Through you, Madam Chair, that is correct.
Right. And what I heard you say, Ms. Kennedy, is that we did send letters to each one of those properties, letting them know that this was coming up and just letting them know this was coming up?
Yes, that's correct. Through you, Madam Chair, that's correct. We did send letters out to anybody that had received a vacancy rebate in the last 3 years. We sent a letter out letting them know. The other thing that we did do that I didn't mention was we also had a website up as well, and continued to put the information up there and advertise the input and the way that the public could have input as well.
Great, thank you. Because this may feel a lot better because some of the letters that came to us over the last 24 hours, right? And also what we heard tonight as the delegation, that only 45 people had responded, and what happened, everyone else didn't know about it. But I'm glad to see that we did actually send a letter to each one of those properties. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Nothing further from the committee? Great. Any members of the public wish to speak?
I heard a couple things that was interesting. The question was asked, do we need to do this? And the answer was no. And the other part to that answer was, well, the province wants to be competitive and have everybody do the same thing. So let's kind of be a monopoly and raise everybody's taxes is effectively what the province is saying. I'm saying, if we don't do this and the province thinks we're going to become more competitive, let's just become more competitive. If this gives us an advantage, and the province is saying it would give us an advantage by not doing it, and we don't need the money, then why not just become more competitive? You heard Mr. Martin speak about speculation and building stuff that comes online. He built City Place 1, 2, and 3 in the middle of a recession. And he probably didn't know that recession was coming, otherwise he wouldn't have done it and had the vacancy there. But without that rebate, and if somebody's not strong, that can sink that landlord. And if that landlord sunk, that means they're no longer investing in our community. This is $950,000 that's coming out of commercial taxes as an increase. This is an increase to tax. It's the only way you can look at it. And it's going to go back onto the commercial market in some form. And we have to remember that our retail market is going to suffer in the future. I don't know how many of you guys use Amazon. I didn't until 2 years ago. But now I buy everything on Amazon. I actually get annoyed when my wife goes to buy strips for the hot tub, because I think it wastes time, and I click the buttons and it shows up the next day. Our retail is going to suffer as online stuff continues, and we're going to continue to throw more taxes on a part of the role that is already paying an increase. We're seeing some of our properties 15, 20% increases in our property taxes itself, and then we're adding more to it. And I say, if we're going to do this, if we've made that decision, then give it back to the commercial and industrial tax rolls. Reallocate the money that's coming back to where it's going. This shouldn't be a windfall for residential homes. You're hearing a lot of people from residential homes, of course they want that. Like I would. My taxes are going to stay the same. It's a benefit to me. And you might have had 40 responses from people, but you don't know if the 40 responses are from people that maybe have 500,000 square feet of commercial space, or 100,000 square feet of commercial space, or 50. So I think you should try to understand that maybe there's only 50 responses, but those 50 responses could be a large portion of your actual tax base. And us as business owners aren't very well organized. And I did get this letter. I didn't know about it. I honestly didn't. I was climbing Mount Everest when I went out, and my staff filed it away because they didn't think anything of it. We talked to Peter Splinter. He didn't know anything about it. Barry Smith didn't know anything about it. I talked to Harold Spring from Frontenac Mall. He didn't know anything about it. So when I think Councillor Osanek asked, what could we have done? My statement was, if you really wanted input, you would have put a red sheet in everybody's tax roll or tax bill that was commercial and said, hey guys, we're going to eliminate your tax rebate. Let us know what you think, and here's the survey. And in the survey, say how many square feet do you own, or ask for the name and we can go through it. When the treasurer says we don't know what the vacancy rebate is, I don't understand that. Like, if you had 170 properties that it's applied for it, and you have all the information on all the commercial properties, then we should know what that amount is. Like, we know as a municipality how much commercial property we have, and we know how much applied for vacancy rebate. So we should know that exact number, I would think. And admittedly, that's probably not accurate, because not all the time somebody files for it, maybe you forget or do whatever, and that does happen. Admittedly, we aren't organized, and we're not showing what's going on here as businesses, but I would ask that we just send it away for a little bit and try to get feedback. If you've only got 40 people that responded, did that say that that was enough to make a decision on, or maybe we didn't let them know? Like, I don't know how many commercial tax rolls we send out to. So, you know, if there's 1,000 people that we send out commercial tax bills to, and we only got 0.5% response, that, like, I don't know if there's 2,000. I honestly don't know those numbers, but we should try to at least understand if we have 2,000 property owners that are commercial, or 1,000, and how many of them are responding. If we only got a really poor response, I think that maybe we should look at whether or not we need to do another response. And I'd ask this committee to think about just adjourning it and maybe sending out another letter. And what's it going to hurt? We know that this is going on in 2019. It's not going to change. So if we wait a few more months, we're still going to be able to implement all of these changes. And at least maybe the business owners don't organize themselves, but at least you give them a chance to do it. And if you do end up implementing it, please give it back to the commercial guys, because they're going to need it.
Thank you. Any other members of the public wish to speak? Okay, seeing none, ask the committee for a motion to get this recommendation on the floor. Do I have a mover, please? Councillor Cannon, seconded by Councillor Stroud. Thank you very much. Any discussion? Councillor Bohm.
Madam Chair, and through you. So kind of heard a lot of information tonight. One of the things that sticks out in my mind is that, yes, there was consultation, but the vast majority of responses were from residential who may or may not own commercial or industrial spaces. I also have come to learn that there's kind of a lot of misunderstandings out there of what this actually means to people who own those properties. And some of the comments were, well, you know, it's just an incentive not to rent the space, which when you look at the rebate and the cost of having a vacant space, what I learned was the rebate does not defer the cost of not renting that at all. So, I mean, if you have those spaces, you want them rented, because this rebate is more, and I believe it was Mr. Martin that stated it, that rebate allows you to possibly reinvest in that space to change it to be more appealing, whether it's subdividing it because everybody's trying to reduce their square footage, so you could end up with multiple tenants. So really, in the grand scheme of things, I'm not sure that that money is actually just going into somebody's pocket. I think it's actually being reinvested into the community. There's also, you know, a little bit of a misunderstanding about, you know, where we're going with this. And in my mind, if we're going to phase it out, I probably would have liked to have seen it done out over a little bit longer period, because when you're used to having something and it disappears, it's very hard to adjust. We know the economy's, you know, humming along slightly, but it's still somewhat rocky. And so to say to somebody, you know, you were going to get this, whatever, maybe for some people it's 30,000, maybe for others it's less or more, and then kind of have that phased out quickly, that could put a few people under. And then, like, what are you going to do? Now there's those spaces that now are not just vacant, but kind of being sold off, and you basically help somebody kind of go out of business, which is not at all what we want to do here. So I also think that what I'll do here is, this is something that the next council is going to kind of have to chew on, because they're going to have the repercussions from this. So I'm going to move a motion to defer it until the next meeting of the admin policies, which I believe is February 14th, 2019, unless there's some reason why there should be a special meeting called in January. And what I think this will allow is more engagement and more information to come in on this. I have a seconder.
Motion for seconded by Councillor Stanek. Okay, anything on time and place, Councillor Stroud?
On time, I'd like to ask the treasurer. So we defer and we vote on it possibly at our next meeting, and it goes to council in late February. So with that timeline, could we theoretically, if we decide to go ahead with it, would the deferral affect the timeline in the report, or could we still make those timelines?
So I would expect we would still be able to make those timelines going early in 2019. The one piece of information we don't have is the deadline from the province. So that could change the answer, but I would anticipate at this point, because that date hasn't been announced, that it would be later on in 2019 and we'd be able to meet that timeline.
Anyone place? Time or place? No? Okay. So I'll call a question on the motion to defer. All those in favor? Opposed? Carries. Okay, so we will move on to item E. Minor amendments to the flag display policy for Downtown Gateway Project. And this is coming to us from the Commissioner of Community Services. Would you like to speak to the report? Commissioner Hurdle?
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. So this report essentially speaks to some of the changes that we are looking at making, and primarily at the corner of Princess and Division. So some of you may be familiar. We do have 3 flagpoles that have flags on an island at the corner there, but a number of you may not have noticed that we also have about 5 other flagpoles along Princess Street. I was one of those individuals that did not notice that. As we have been working through the process for the public art improvements that council directed us to do at that corner of the street, we actually want to remove some of these flagpoles that have not been utilized on a regular basis. I think maybe a couple of times a year at the most. We would like to be able to remove some of those and be able to replace them with some of the public art pieces that we've been working on.
Any comments from members of the public once the agenda was public on this item?
Through Madam Chair, not that I'm aware of.
Deferral. Okay, so any further questions from members of the committee? Seeing none. Any members of the public wish to speak? Okay, seeing none. I'll call the vote on the... Oh, right, sorry. Could I have a mover, please? Councillor Schell, seconder. Members of the committee, councillor for seconder for item number E, or letter E. Councillor Bohm, thank you very much. All those in favor of the recommendation? Opposed? Carries. Okay. Next, we need to move into the Rideau Crest Home Board of Management. Can I have a mover, please? Councillor Schell, seconded by Councillor Bohm. Thank you very much for being with us at this hour in the evening. And I would like to ask that, oh wait, sorry, got to call the question. All those in favor, moving into Rideau Crest? Excellent, passes. And now we will hear from staff. Thank you again.
Thank you. So this report contains information from August 2018 through to the end of September. Rideau Crest Home has maintained an occupancy rate of 99.16% in August and 99.6% in September. Rideau Crest had 3 incidents reportable to the Ministry of Health and Long-Term Care for August and September combined. The ministry was present in the home in September from the 17th through to the 20th to investigate 1 complaint and 5 critical incidents. There were no findings of non-compliance from these investigations. There are currently 402 people on the waiting list for the home. The home had 1 respiratory outbreak in September on our 3rd floor. There was no findings on the viral culture completed, and the outbreak was declared over on the 24th of September. As of the end of September, Rideau Crest Home has spent 68.3% of its municipal contributions, which is $380,000 under budget. This is excluding a number of commitments. Timing differences contributing to the underspend include timing of payroll costs, which are typically higher during December due to the fact that there's 2 stat holidays in that month associated with premium and backfilling costs. Other non-compensation timing differences include $56,000 in accumulated lieu bank leave subject to possible payout at the end of the year, $15,000 1-month timing difference for extended care and point-click care contract payments, and $11,000 for audit fees not yet charged, and a $21,000 net basic resident revenue due to the province. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, questions, members of the committee? Okay, seeing none. Members of the public? All right. Okay, so can I have a motion to rise from the request? Councillor Bohm, seconded by Councillor Sinek. Thank you very much. Thank you again to staff. All those in favor? Carries, thank you. So the last report is on the addeds, and I do have it, yeah. Okay, and it is item G, smoking bylaw update, and this is a report provided to us by the Commissioner of Community Services. Would you like to speak to it? Go ahead, Commissioner Hurrell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I know it's been a long night already, and I apologize that this is coming to you through an added. So this is something that we've been trying to work through fairly quickly in terms of updating and changing our smoking bylaw to reflect the new provincial legislation on cannabis particularly. Most of you might be aware that on October 17, the day that recreational cannabis became legal, the province also passed its Bill 36, which provided a number of legislative rules around cannabis, including aligning it with the Smoke-Free Ontario Act. So what's being proposed tonight is essentially in order to not have a bylaw basically that was track change everywhere and a number of changes just to include the word cannabis, we propose to repeal the current bylaw and introduce this new bylaw. So this new bylaw is a little bit more restrictive than the Smoke-Free Ontario Act, but those are regulations that were previously in place. So I want to make sure it's clear we're not introducing new restrictions. We're keeping the same restrictions. Our local restrictions were always more than the provincial restrictions. What we are doing, though, is we're including cannabis and we're also including vaping because those two were not previously included. And what that created was definitely confusion in the public as to where can I smoke or can I not smoke, because our bylaw essentially currently allows people to smoke cannabis in places where they're not allowed to smoke tobacco, which does not make any sense, I know. So this will bring everything in line and consistent in terms of bylaw. The other thing that is proposed to be changed, other than the introduction of cannabis and vaping, is the set fine. We're proposing to increase it from $195 to $250, and the reason for that is because the provincial set fine has also changed to $250. So this is bringing it in line with provincial regulation. As you probably are aware, public health is actually implementing and enforcing this bylaw, so that doesn't change. It's the same thing. We're just introducing cannabis, and we wanted to do that as quickly as possible to avoid any further confusion in the public as far as where people are allowed to smoke or not allowed to smoke. So I will leave it at that and take any questions that you might have.
Councillor Straub?
So dates. So October 17th, this was passed. And now it's 3 weeks later, and it's on our addeds to update the bylaw to harmonize everything, essentially making it, as you just said, the rules for smoking, tobacco and cannabis and vaping all in the same regulations, which make it easier for the members of the public. So is there anything, because of that tight timeline, is there anything that's possibly not quite ready, or are you confident that this is ready to go for a bylaw to the next council meeting?
Through you, Chair. So I'm confident that the bylaw is ready. We've worked with public health. I should have mentioned that. So they've reviewed the bylaw. We've met with them to discuss this. We've also consulted with the Kingston accommodation partners as far as signage is concerned, because I know that they have a number of properties. So we have signage that will be made available, which is provincial signage that can be added on to the properties, and that will be made available through public health.
Thank you.
Thank you. And just a clear, so that I know, right, how our smoking bylaw and now cannabis gets enforced. It's not our bylaw officers, right, doing any ticketing. It's up to the health unit to do any ticketing. And we know that the health unit doesn't have a lot of like enforcement officers on there, but that is the way it's always been. It's not our bylaw officers. Like we had something at our workplace, people were smoking too close to the door, and we had to go through everything and basically tell the staff that we're really sensitive to smoke, that it can't be a city person going down to Plastarms. It had to be someone from the health unit to go and solve it if the person wouldn't move away just by someone saying, you have to move back.
So through you, Madam Chair, so yes, public health is the one implementing or enforcing the bylaw. That's always been the case, you're correct. And based on our conversations with public health, I mean, they respond to complaints the same way our bylaw officers would respond to complaints. They've indicated to us that they didn't receive that many complaints in the past, so maybe people don't know or are not aware that they're supposed to contact public health, so maybe that's further education that we could do.
Thanks, great. Any other members of the committee on questions? No? Members of the public? Okay, go ahead.
Can you go to the microphone, please? Yeah, sure.
Through you, Madam Chair, how many fines have been given out with regard to the smoking bylaw?
Through you, Madam Chair, I don't number, but I can obtain it from public health, which again enforces the bylaw before this is approved by council on November 20th and provided to council.
One question, Madam Chair. Given the fact that the health unit does have very limited resources in which to try to enforce this bylaw, and you know, having bylaws are great as long as they are enforced, is there an opportunity for the city and their bylaw officers to be able to enforce the city bylaw?
Madam Chair, at this point, I would not change in terms of enforcement. I think our bylaw officers from a city perspective are already probably cannot keep up with the number of complaints. Like I said, I will get the numbers and I will ask public health to attend on November 20th, but based on our recent conversation with public health, they haven't received that many complaints, so their issue doesn't seem to be their ability to respond. Maybe the issue is that people are not directing the complaints at the proper places. I do appreciate members of the public being concerned for public health and their ability to respond.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we have a recommendation. Can I have a mover, please? Councillor Stroud, second by Councillor Bone. Thank you very much. Any comments or discussion? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? Carries? Excellent. All right, so now we are at motions. Do we have any motions? No. Do we have any notices of motions? Nope. Okay. Any other business? Councillor Bone?
Madam Chair, and through you, I was just going to point out that the last meeting of this committee, and I'd just like to say that it was nice serving with everybody, and if you're coming back, see you next time. If you're not, we'll see you around the corner.
Excellent. Well, our heartfelt thanks to Councillor Schell, who will not be back with us. Oh, or Councillor Camden. Oh, no.
He's already forgotten.
Come on, Council.
Sorry. Night. You're.
I pretty much was to the meeting.
Okay, so we do have some correspondence, which is we've all received in our packages. Date and time of next meeting, February 14th, 2019. Big hearts and love and kisses to everyone on that day. Tis. Can I have a motion to adjourn, please? Motion to adjourn. Councillor Osanek. Excellent. Motion seconded. Councillor Bohm. All those in favor?